A very warm welcome, everyone. All of you here in the room and also you online watching. My name is Johan Nilsson. I'm the CEO of Upsales. And we have a great afternoon together here today. Just before we go on, I'm going to let you know who we are. So we are Upsales. We're a Swedish tech company. And we do software. We do software, CRM software and sales automation software. We do also marketing automation and account-based marketing software. If you want to know more, please try us out online. You go to our website and you can try it yourselves. We at Upsales are very happy today. We have one of our big heroes here in person today. We've been following him for years. We've been reading his books, his articles. I'm following his newsletter. And he's a real big profile within customer success, looking after your customers in the right way. We have started implementing his thinking in Upsales, and we can see results already. So I'm very happy to have him here today and let him share his knowledge in this field. So I would like to welcome Mr. Lincoln Murphy on stage.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you very much. Wow, this is awesome. Hey, everybody. Really glad to be here. We have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to kind of jump into this. Let's go over the agenda real quick. I'm going to introduce you to this concept of customer success-driven growth. And some of you may have some ideas around what customer success is, but hopefully after today you'll have a new understanding and appreciation for what customer success can really do for your company. So we'll start out kind of with that introduction. Then we'll get into this idea of ideal customer profiles. That may also be something that you've thought about or talked about or even done, but my take on it may be a little bit different and hopefully at least gets you thinking in the right direction. Then we'll talk about and actually go over some tactics on targeted distribution and intelligent acquisition of customers. Now, we're going to cover a lot of different things, and some things may apply directly to you, and some things may not, and that's okay too. But hopefully, again, we just kind of get your brain moving in the right direction. Then we'll take a break, and we'll take about 10 minutes, and then we'll get back to it. We'll talk about this concept of success milestones and joint accountabilities. This is really where we get into understanding what it's going to take for the customer to be successful and orchestrating and operationalizing that so that we can get to account expansion and advocacy. And account expansion, that's the holy grail. That's what we're trying to do. We want our customers to grow with us, right? Well, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And what I'm going to tell you today is the right way to do it so that the customers that expand, the new revenue that they bring in for us is revenue that will stick around for a long time. And then we'll do Q&A and discussion. So save your questions to the end so that we have something to talk about, but also it's pretty likely that I'll answer a lot of the questions as we go along. Is that fair? All right, cool. Here's the thing. So we're talking about engine of growth. 100% of the time, I find that the biggest barrier to growth is not being deliberate. What does that mean? Well, deliberate is doing something consciously and intentionally. Very often, what we do is we throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, see what sticks. I go in and I work with companies all the time and I hear, we tried that, or we played with that. I'm like, well, no wonder it didn't work, because all you did was try it, or you played with it. If we're deliberate about things and we stick to it and we go at this, from a scientific way, at least having a hypothesis-driven model, I think we're going to make a lot more progress. But really, a lot of times, it's just understanding what we're doing so that we will stick with it, so that we understand the basis of what we're doing. And if we do all these things right, we actually get these four things. And how many of you agree with me that these are the four things that we want from our customers? We want our customers to stay longer. We want our customers to buy more, to expand internally, or to basically invite us into other parts of their business, and to advocate for us externally. Do we all agree that that's what we want from our customers? Okay, cool. Then how come most of us kind of leave that to chance? All right? The reality is very few companies truly operationalize making these things happen. But we all agree I've never had anybody say, those aren't actually the things I want from my customers, right? So we all agree that these are the things we want, but we don't really put in the effort or the processes to make sure these things happen, to make sure that our customers are successful so that they will stay longer, so that they will buy more. Customers that are not successful, and we'll talk about exactly what that means in a minute, customers that are not successful tend to not want to do more business with you, right? They're probably looking for a way out. So they're not going to stay longer, they're not going to buy more, they're not going to invite you into other parts of their business, and they're certainly not going to go out publicly and advocate for you. They're not going to leave positive reviews, they're not going to tell their friends, yet we assume that they will, right? We hope that they will at least. And maybe it'll happen sometimes organically, but we want to get to a point where we're not just hoping those things happen, we're really making them. Which means we need to grow because of our effort, not in spite of it, right? That's a pretty sound idea, which means we have to understand what customer success is. And customer success in the concept of just understanding what does success mean for our customers. Forget about anything that you might have heard about customer success for a second. Just think about it like that, what those two words mean, customers' success. So if we think about it from that standpoint, then we would say customers' success is when they achieve their desired outcome through their interactions with our company. Now, rest assured, I will show you this slide at least 27 times today because I want you to leave knowing what customer success is. But more than knowing it and being able to recite it, I want you to have this as really the reason you exist, the reason your company exists. I want you to have it as the reason your company exists because the reality is this is why your company exists, at least in the market, at least to your customers. Your customers allow you, and the people in your market allow you to exist because at least they think you will help them achieve their desired outcome, right? That's what they assume. Now it's up to you to actually deliver on that. And if you do, you'll get those 4 things that we were looking at earlier. So customer success is when your customers achieve their desired outcome through their interactions with your company. Now, I'm going to deep dive into a couple of these points. The main points here that I want you to understand, interactions and desired outcome. And we'll talk a lot about that in a little bit. So understanding that is the definition of customer success. We also have to understand that when we're talking about account expansion, getting customers to buy more, invite us into other parts of their business, that actually is part of the customer's success. Now, I used to meaning literally a few weeks ago, I used to say customers that are successful will expand. And I think that was valid. But just over the last few weeks, I started talking about this more and thinking about it, and I realized actually that's not true. It's not that customers that are successful, it's not having just their success will cause them to expand. Actually, if we think about it, it's when your customers are expanding, that's part of their success. Because our customers are always growing and evolving and changing. I don't know about you, but I don't want my customer to be the same in a year from now as they are today. I want them to grow and expand and evolve, right? So their expansion of their relationship with us indicates that they are successful, right? So the way we have to think about this is different. By the way, that's going to drive how you operationalize this internally. If you have customer success managers that aren't salespeople, for example, and they don't like selling, if you start to approach it like this, it takes away the idea that you're selling something. Really, in order to make you successful, you're going to need this add-on because other companies just like yours have needed that add-on, right? So we're not really selling anything anymore. We're just working to make the customer successful. And that's what I mean by customer success-driven growth. So that's why I add the driven growth to customer success because I think it positions it properly in our minds. This really means as customers succeed and evolve, their relationship with us should evolve and grow. Okay, that's the concept. Now, so we know what customer success is, the definition. Again, I will share that with you multiple times. And we know what customer success driven growth is, but let me just stop and make sure that nothing's holding us up from moving forward with some misconceptions about customer success. Okay, so if we came in here with any understanding about customer success, there's always the possibility that understanding was flawed, and so I just want to set the record straight. let's talk about what customer success is not, okay? Customer success. How many of you here have a customer success management department in your organization? Okay, so a handful. Customer success is not just a department. It's not just this organization that sits there and ensures the customers are successful. Customer success management is often an organization, but customer success as a whole is something different. It's when your customers achieve their desired outcome through their interactions with your company. That is not a department. Now, a department, customer success management, may be needed to enable that, to make sure it happens. But those are two different things. Customer success is also not customer support. This is probably the biggest misconception, that customer support customer success is just customer support 2.0, or a fancy way of saying it. And the reality is customer success is not customer support. Customer support, the reactive sort of break fix type of situation, that is incredibly important. That's required. We have to have it. Your customers need to be able to contact you when they have a problem. That's just not customer success. Now, that may feed into customer success. To know if a customer is truly healthy and on their way to achieving their desired outcome, we probably need to know whether or not they're being taken care of, whether or not their support tickets are being answered in a positive way. But that is not customer success. Customer success is also not account management. Account management, sort of the traditional account management, was really all about the account. It was revenue driven. It was making sure the customers renew, making sure they upsell to reach some sort of internal quota, but it really didn't take into consideration whether the customers were actually achieving their desired outcome. So you had internal quotas sort of forcing people to push products onto customers that they didn't really need, and you end up with things that hurt trust. And that's why traditional account management, it's been around for a long time, but it didn't necessarily do what we really wanted it to do. So account management is still a thing. Oftentimes we actually have to have dedicated resources to handle renewals and to handle upsells because maybe they're more complex. Maybe they require almost another sales cycle. But that needs to fit in to the overall concept of customer success. And in the US right now, there was a scandal with Wells Fargo Bank where basically they took this idea of account management to its ridiculous extreme, and they started opening accounts for customers to try to hit some sort of internal expansion quota, opening accounts for customers when the customers didn't even know it. So that's the extreme opposite of customer success, right? That is just doing things that are completely it's a customer negative action. So what we want to do is make sure that any account management is tempered with reality around whether or not the customer is achieving their desired outcome, so that we know when that revenue is brought in and we count it as a positive thing, that it's going to stick around, right? And that it's actually going to lead to more revenue. Now, here's one that I really I like to emphasize, and sometimes it's even a little bit controversial, but if you understand where I'm coming from, I think you won't think it's very controversial. And that is, customer success is not about customer happiness or delight. Very often, they're equated. And here's the reality. You guys came here today, and I so appreciate your time and your attention. But let's say you had a bad commute. Let's say you have something going on in your life that it's not great. You still have to be here. You still want to learn about this for your business, but you have some things that are not that great. So you're not emotionally happy. Now, I would love it if all of you would smile at me and laugh at my jokes and be emotionally happy. Hey, it worked. But I can't solve for that. I can't ensure that you're going to be happy. All I can do is give you information to take back to your office and help your business. That's the best I can do. And if I do that, then this was successful, even if you don't like me, even if you're not emotionally happy, right? So that's what we have to understand with our customers. Sometimes our customers are not emotionally happy, yet they're actually quite successful. And those customers that are pushing back on us, asking for new features, opening support tickets like crazy, always seeming like they're negative, those might be our best customers. The customers, however, that we never hear from, that maybe give us a high NPS score, that seem happy, those are actually the ones we should be worried about, because we don't really understand what's going on with them. They're never in contact with us. if we mistake this idea that happiness equates to success, then we could over-optimize for the wrong customers, under-optimize for the customers that really need us, and then we're going to be in trouble, okay? So, customer success is not happiness or delight. Customer success is also not about churn mitigation, reducing churn or saving customers. Look, sometimes you've done things that lead to a cohort of customers that are on their way out the door. You should do what you can to save them, assuming you should save them, assuming they have success potential and you could actually make them successful. But don't confuse saving customers, offering them discounts or other concessions to get them to stay. Don't confuse that with customer success. If you did customer success right, they wouldn't get to that point in the first place. All you're doing is begging, borrowing, making concessions to get them to stay. They're still not successful. You now have to get them back on that path to success. And if you don't do that, all you're doing is prolonging the inevitable churn. Oh, and by the way, they're going to be even more upset the second time they try to leave because you promised things that you couldn't deliver, okay? So it's not about churn mitigation or saving customers. It's about making them successful in the first place so they don't get to that point. Really big distinction. Finally, customer success is not about holding your customer's hand or babysitting your customers or really even checking in with customers. But if you're saying things like holding their hand or babysitting and other customer negative ways of speaking, you should probably stop that, because that's going to come out either directly, either you're going to accidentally forward an email to a customer that's going to have something in the thread about how they're awful and how you have to babysit them, and that's just going to make things worse. Or, and by the way, that happens frequently, whether it's something specifically like that or just the way you're referring to the customers in an email thread could be perceived as negative. More than likely, it's going to come out in the way that you serve your customers, the way that you actually work with them. You're not going to give them what they need because you have a negative view of them. And I'll tell you, if you have a negative view of your customers, you need to stop thinking about your company as a victim. You get to choose the customers you do business with by the way you position your company. And if you are not deliberate in the way you position your company and in the customers you go after, then you're just going to basically you're going to accept whoever finds you, whoever figures out through no fault of your own that they could do business with you, you're going to let them in, right? And so now you're going to let people in, customers in that don't necessarily have success potential. And what happens? They're not successful. Well, then they become needy and a pain, right? So we see it's actually your fault. And the cool thing about it being your fault is we can fix it. Right? If it was really just their fault, then we have no control, but we do. We do get to choose who we want to do business with by the way we position things, and that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So we know what customer success is not. What is customer success? It is a growth engine. And if you take nothing else away from our time together today, just think about that. When you're thinking about the success of your customers, understand that if we make our customers successful, they will make us successful because this is a growth engine. And I'll tell you, the best companies out there, and how I define the best companies are those that have what we would call net revenue retention of over 100%. So net revenue retention in a very simplified form is when your customer, if you say we have this cohort of customers, we're going to start, this is our existing customer base, we're going to start one quarter, let's say, with $1,000 in ARR, and we're going to end that quarter with $1,500 ARR from that existing customer base. We grew revenue from that existing customer base by $500, or we have 150% net revenue retention. Now it's net of any churn that might have happened. So let's say we lost a couple $100 in that time period because one customer churned and another customer went through a reduction in what they pay us, a downsell or something like that. We gave them a discount to stay, but we actually brought in $700 in revenue, so we end with a net of $1,500. So we end with a net of 150% in that net revenue retention. The best companies have 100 to 120% net revenue retention, which means that from their existing customer base, they're actually growing. The best of the best, they have 120% plus. Now, the really interesting thing about that and why it's important to understand is the best companies have customer success as their operating philosophy. They're already getting over 100% net revenue retention simply by saying everything we do is to make sure the customers are successful. right? So every decision they make really takes into consideration across all their different departments, customer success. The best of the best have customer success as their operating model. So they've really operationalized this, and those are the ones that are getting 120, 130, 150% or more in net revenue retention. That's awesome. That's what we want. If we have investors, our investors probably would love that, right? They're going to value our companies higher because we have a net revenue retention above 100%, or certainly even better, we get to that 130, 150% range. We're in good place. Here's the thing. Like I said, the best of the best have customer success as their operating model, and that's really their growth engine. And the thing that powers that is customer success management. And this is the distinction between customer success as being this overall idea, this philosophy, and customer success management, which is really the orchestration, operationalization, instrumentation, and intervention that is designed to move the customer towards their ever-evolving desired outcome. Now, that is a crazy long definition, but it's where I'm at today. My definitions are always evolving. I like these words, orchestration, operationalization, instrumentation, and intervention, to really talk about all the things that need to happen to ensure the customers are successful. Orchestration is simply setting things up with your customer. By the way, you can start doing that today. Doesn't require any technology, doesn't require anything fancy. If you know that you have an upsell that would work for a customer later on, as soon as you sign them, you should mention that upsell. Mention when it'll be something that will make sense for them to buy, and then say, but you don't need that right now because you're not ready for it. But when you are, we'll talk about it. You just orchestrated the fact that there's an upsell later on, and it's going to make it a lot easier to do that later on. It's not going to seem like it just comes out of the blue. It's not going to seem like it's something that's incongruent, that you're trying to force something on them that they didn't expect. So orchestration is really important, and that happens. That is with upsell. That's with advocacy. That's with really just anything with the customers. Just orchestrating this. That stuff you can do today. Now, operationalization, that's really putting the systems in place. Some of that's going to be technology. A lot of that's just going to be workflow, just making sure that we're doing the same thing for every customer, or at least every customer in a specific segment. We're able to do these things in a repeatable fashion so that we can scale. Then there's instrumentation. That's really where technology comes into play. We know what our customers are doing, not just product usage, but we have sort of visibility into everything that's going on surrounding the customer from a contextual standpoint. And then intervention, that's also something you can start doing today. That doesn't necessarily require technology. It helps to have technology in place to know when you should intervene. But intervention is it's proactive. It's making sure that we are there to guide the customer to their next success milestone. But it's also intervening when we see that they got off course a little bit, right? When they weren't doing the things that they needed to do to be successful. So intervention and orchestration are things that you can start doing immediately. Operationalization takes a little bit more planning, and instrumentation obviously takes some technology. But the thing here I want you to really understand is that ever-evolving desired outcome. Our customers are always changing. There's no such thing as a static customer. And I'll tell you, across the board, pretty much, certainly I have more visibility into the way investors think in the United States, but also in some other developing countries. And I know that there's a great focus being put on customers that are growing. In other words, if you go to your board and say, hey, we renewed everybody this month or this quarter or this year or whatever, and it turns out that you renewed them at the same rate, right? They didn't expand. That's actually not a good thing. They want customers that are growing. Account expansion is everything. And so, as crazy as it sounds, simply having customers that renew, it's not enough. And whether you have investors or not, that's probably a good way to think about it anyway, right? The investors are looking at it because it's going to drive the value of the company. Well, if you don't have investors, still probably pretty cool to have your company value going up, and maybe that at least is saying that we're getting more revenue, right? So even if we don't have those external stakeholders. So customer success management is key. And I drew a cartoon for you. It's a cartoon flow chart. Basically, it says, look, if we kind of map out the entire customer life cycle, we can see that there's different success milestones that customers are going to go through. And some of those success milestones are going to have what we would say is a logical advocacy ask associated with it. In other words, I'm not just going to randomly ask you to be an advocate for me. I'm going to figure out what success milestone has the most logical, or is logical to apply an advocacy ask to it. And once you reach that success milestone, then I'm going to ask you to be an advocate for us. The same thing goes with expansion. Across your life cycle, you're going to have some success milestones that have logical expansion opportunities or upsell opportunities associated with it. And when you hit that point, we're going to talk about that upsell. This is just a visualization of what we just talked about with customer success management. But there's another aspect to customer success management that I want you to really think about, and that is this concept of enrichment. This is one of those things where it's so obvious, but if we don't really think about it, we miss this huge opportunity. We're always looking for like the best voice of the customer product out there. You know, how can we get feedback from our customers? And that's cool, but what we forget is that there are people in our company that work with our customers right now that have a ton of intel on our customers. They know the use cases that are working. They know the use cases that are a bad fit for our product. They know the way your customers talk about things, the way they talk about what they do, the way they talk about your product, the way they talk about other products in the market. Not just sentiment-wise, but literally the language they use. Don't you think some of that would be really helpful to sales, really helpful to marketing? But how often is that actually fed back into sales and marketing or product or any other part of the company? Not as often as it should be. So we need to think about customer success. Certainly if you have a customer success organization, we need to think about that as having that voice of the customer and using that to feed back into the rest of the organization and doing that on a consistent basis. And I'll tell you, right now, your sales and marketing people are probably not going to your customer success managers or your customer success management organization and asking for this information. And I'll tell you right now that your customer success management organization is probably not volunteering this information. This enrichment process is not happening right now, and it should be. But it has to be orchestrated. It has to be something that you put in place. And the same thing goes for sales to customer success, right? The learning that we get when we're talking to a customer is often not passed to those people that are going to work with the customer, not just post-sale. Post-sale is just that immediate time right after the sale closes. But over the 3, 5, 7, 10 years that they're going to be our customer, right? We need to understand what's going on from the customer standpoint. And the salespeople that are working with the customer before they close probably have a lot of intel that isn't being passed on. You know, they're going to check the boxes in the CRM to say, this is what I learned from the customer. And that's probably it, unless you go talk to them and try to learn. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen on a consistent basis, so we need to operationalize that, and that's the enrichment process. So, that makes sense. Okay, cool. So we understand that your success is, meeting your revenue forecast or otherwise meeting your goals. And their success is achieving their desired outcome. And by the way, when I say desired outcome, 100% of the time, I'm talking about your customer's desired outcome. I know what yours is. We don't need to talk about that. Their success is achieving their desired outcome, and your success is directly tied to their success. I really want you to understand that. I want you to get up in the morning before you go into the office and say, the reason our company exists is to help our customers achieve their desired outcome. You may think your company exists to generate a profit. Your company exists to return something to your investors. Look, that's table stakes. That's why there's a business opportunity around whatever you're doing, right? You wouldn't be doing that if that wasn't there. That just exists. But the whole reason that your company exists in the marketplace is to help your customers achieve their desired outcome. Don't forget that. As soon as you forget that, you take your eye off the ball, then churn starts to become a problem and growth starts to slow, and we stop being deliberate about growth and all those things. Your success is directly tied to their success. Now, how many of you have external investors? Okay. So those that have external investors, this will apply directly to in a way that I can only imagine you feel on a daily basis. The rest of you, this should hopefully still apply, even if you don't have those investors. But we want to talk about how customer success directly impacts the value of your company. Okay, so some of this, again, will apply directly to those that have external funding, but those of you that don't, this should still be very important. In a very basic, very simplified way, this is how you value a company. Now, there are lots of different ways, and actually even the definition of revenue is always up for grabs. But in a very simplified way, the way we value a company is revenue times a multiplier. Here's the thing. Revenue is relatively easy to understand, although, like I said, even what revenue we're talking about. Is it bookings? Is it recurring revenue versus non-recurring? Whatever. We'll just simplify and say whatever revenue you have. The multiplier side of this is the one that nobody really knows what's going on there. Well, I don't know if you guys will admit this. I'll certainly admit it. There was a time where I would talk about multiplier, but I had no idea what I was talking about. I didn't know what it meant. And that's when I realized I should probably know what that means. Now, it's one of those things that even if we know what it means, the reality is those that are giving you the multiplier, the investors that are putting a value on your company, the acquirer that is putting a value on your company, they're not going to tell you what goes into the multiplier. That's their secret sauce. If they tell you, then you can game the system, and they'll have to pay more for the equity in your company or pay more for your company. So they're never going to tell you exactly what goes into this. So what I've had to do is just figure out, in general, what are the things that go into the multiplier. So let's kind of look at this. Revenue. If we focus on customer success as our growth engine, we will have more revenue. If you don't have external funding, that should just get your attention right there, right? If customers stay longer, so churn goes down, we end the quarter with more customers, we will have more revenue simply because we still have the same amount of customers. So even if we're not growing, at least there's going to be that. But it gets better. Our customers stay longer, and they also buy more. They buy more revenue. If they invite us into other parts of their company, more revenue. And if they advocate for us, and that brings in other customers, and by the way, customers that come in through advocacy tend to be better customers, there's more revenue. So we can get that. We get that side of it, right? So we're going to have more revenue. But let's get into the really interesting stuff, the multiplier. These are some things that go into the multiplier that your investors will never tell you are going to go into this. So number one is customer lifetime value. Now, how many of you have heard of customer lifetime value? Okay, cool. That's another one of those things that people talk about. Maybe they even have some idea, and by the way, there's no universal definition of what goes into customer lifetime value. You might even have an understanding, though, that it's what? It's the value of the customer over their lifetime as a customer. Okay, that's pretty simple. But how does that actually figure into things? And this is the thing that always kind of got me. We talk about customer lifetime value, but when we talk about hitting our numbers, we're really just focused on revenue, right? So if we need to end this quarter hitting our numbers, we're just talking about new revenue bookings or something. Well, where does customer lifetime value come into play? And then you go back to, well, okay, so this is how you value companies, revenue times multiplier. Well, there we go, it's revenue again. Where does customer lifetime value come into play? Oh, it's actually a part of the multiplier. If you have a high customer lifetime value, if the value of your customers over their life cycle is going up, if that value is going up, investors will pay more for your company. If that value is going down, your customers are shrinking, they're staying with you, but you have to give them a concession to stay, they're going to discount the value of your company. Pretty simple. So this is why, if you say to hit this quarter's revenue, we're going to close bad fit customers, you're actually hurting the overall value of your company because those customers are not going to stay around. That revenue is not going to be something that's going to be around for the long term. Your lifetime value of your customers may not be going up in the way that you think. That's why it's important to make sure if this is an equation or if this is a problem that matters to you, that you understand really what goes into this and that you're not just hitting those short-term numbers because it's going to affect the overall value of your company. Customer acquisition cost is another one that we have to think about. Now, customer acquisition cost, again, no universal definition, but in general, it's the cost to acquire a customer. Now, sometimes that's fully loaded across, includes salaries and all sorts of things, but again, the actual definition isn't what matters. What I'll tell you is what matters is customer acquisition cost efficiency. So if you agree on a way to define CAC with your board, then what's going to matter is efficiency. How quickly can you pay it back? How efficient is that spend in acquiring good fit customers? And what does that look like compared to the lifetime value of the customer? Oh, there's that customer lifetime value thing again. So now we understand that customer acquisition cost is important. How does customer success impact that? Well, if we're acquiring bad fit customers and they're churning out and they're going out and saying bad things about us, is that going to help our ability to acquire customers? No, it's going to make it harder, right? So now the cost to acquire a customer is going to go up because the sales cycle is going to be increased because I have to now overcome all these new objections. The spin that I'm going to have to put out there to build our brand and to get in front of the customers is going to go up. So it's going to hurt us if we're doing things that are customer negative. On the flip side, if I'm doing things right, our customers are out advocating for us, saying good things, bringing in their peers and their friends and their customers and suppliers and whoever else. That actually increases our ability to bring in customers. And I want to be really clear. Customer acquisition cost doesn't have to, it's not about spending the least you can to acquire a customer. It's about that efficiency. So if our customer lifetime value is going up and we have something in place that really operationalizes the expansion of our customers, right? So the expansion of their accounts across their life cycle. And we can accelerate that growth because we're pegging their expansion to their success. Then we can actually spend more to acquire a customer, which means we can outspend our competition, right? We can really go out and hire the best salespeople and give them the best incentives. And we can go out and spend the most on advertising and events and things like that. And we can acquire those customers in a way where we're spending more, but because we're growing, the customers are growing, their accounts are expanding, the efficiency of that CAC is actually improved. So again, that goes into the multiplier. Net revenue retention, obviously if you have net revenue retention over 100%, and the higher the better, the value of your company is going to go up because that's going to impact the multiplier. On the flip side, if you have something under 100%, that's going to be a problem. You're going to get a discount. So those are like financial, that makes sense. There's a couple other things in here that I want you to think about when it comes to the multiplier. One is total addressable market. Again, something we hear a lot about, and maybe when you pitch to investors, you talk about your total addressable market. The problem is, if you're churning and burning customers, your total addressable market is shrinking, not just by the number of customers that you've burned through, but by some probably less than quantifiable number of customers that are impacted by the negative sentiment that those customers that churned out are bringing. So your total addressable market actually shrinks in a big way when you churn and burn your customers. On the flip side, if you're making your customers successful, then they're out advocating for you, talking about you at events and with their peers. They may introduce you into markets you hadn't even thought about going into. So the actual total addressable market is increasing, right? Again, that's going to be a thing that your investors or a potential acquirer is going to have to value higher. Finally, on this talent acquisition, investors, you often hear, will put money into a company and tell them to step on the gas, right? Step on the accelerator, let's go. What that often means is go hire people. If you are churning and burning your customers, chances are you're churning and burning employees, because nobody likes to work for a company that doesn't care about its customers. And even if that's not all altruistic and like, I really care about the customers, then it may just be, I don't want to work really hard to bring customers in, to try to get them to success, to try to get some value, and then have them churn out. Like that starts to really hurt morale. So if you're churning and burning your customers, it's a very good chance you're churning and burning your employees. And if they do stay because they need a job and they're not just going to leave, they're probably not going to be out there advocating for you. They're probably not going to tell their friends to come work for you. They're probably going to leave some bad reviews on sites like Glassdoor, and say, don't come work here. It's a terrible place. I mean, I can't quit, but I certainly wouldn't wish this on anyone else, right? These are very real things. And I'll tell you, if you guys want some interesting competitive intel, Glassdoor and sites like it are really interesting. Go read about your competitors. Read about what their employees are saying. I've done this, and we found some interesting things. The company I was at, we found that the competitors were apparently selling vaporware. You know, they had people leaving their company saying, "I can't work for a company that sells products that don't exist." We're like, screenshot, send that to, you know, one of the prospects that said that they were considering that other company, right? So Glassdoor can be a really interesting place for competitive intel. It can also be a place that really hurts your ability to grow. And if you can't grow, then why am I going to put money into your company, right? So from a valuation standpoint, that's really important. But forget about the valuation multiple, because most of you don't have external funding or investors. Just think about these things from the standpoint of your business. Like if you're doing things right for your customers, you're going to see benefits in other ways than just revenue, right? That's what we want to get to. Now, just as a little bit more of a visualization of this, just to kind of drive this point home around customer success driven growth and why it's important. If we look at the customer lifetime value, if we sell 1-year contracts for our customers and we keep that customer for 5 years, this is starting to get to the extent of my math ability. If we keep a customer for 5 years and they don't grow, by the way, this is not a successful scenario, right? Based on what I said earlier, this is not ideal. But if we keep the customer for a year or for 5 years and we sell 1-year contracts, then that first sale, that initial sale, was only worth 20% of the overall customer lifetime value. Okay, that's interesting, pretty obvious. But if we do our job right, we get to this point where over the 5-year period, the customer grows significantly, and we maybe get to a point where that initial sale, while still very important, we have to have the initial sale, we have to have the customer, right? But that initial sale becomes worth, you know, maybe 5% of the overall customer lifetime value. And if we do our job really right, maybe we get the customer to stay an extra year. And now we get to a point where that initial sale, while very important, is now worth like 2% of the overall customer lifetime value. Now, why does this matter? This matters because so much of the value that we get out of a customer comes far after that initial sale, right? But, laser pointer, most of the time, all of our resources are in year 1. We put all of our resources into that initial sale, and we don't really think about what has to happen to make all of this value that we could get from the customer come to fruition, right? We don't think about those things. So, it's kind of a visualization of it. In order to make it work, though, we have to start with the definition of customer success. It's when our customers achieve their desired outcome through their interactions with our company. So I said I would deep dive on a couple things here. Let's start with interactions. Interactions start early. The interactions, and by the way, I say interactions. I don't say customers achieve their desired outcome through the use of your product. Your product or your service, whatever it is you provide, is just one interaction that the customer is going to have with you or with your company. That's another one of those things that evolved. I actually used to say that. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, it's not just the product. It's really through all of the interactions. You start thinking about all of the different ways that customers interact with you across their entire life cycle. You start to see that there's actually something really interesting going on there. If we think about the entire customer life cycle, we can actually go back and say, you know, these interactions start early. They start from the first time somebody interacts with our content marketing, right? So the first time they interact with our marketing collateral, the first time a salesperson reaches out to them. That is when these interactions start. And if we think about that, then we understand the seeds of churn could be planted early. I do a lot of reviewing of reasons why people churn. And very often, you see people citing things that happen in the onboarding process for sure, but sometimes even in the sales process. And I don't know about, this is like my therapy. I guess I'm going to admit things that, and some of you may have been there too. I've certainly bought things knowing full well that as soon as I can, I'm going to get out of this situation. The last car I leased, the sales process was actually okay, but the way that it worked, I had to go through go to the finance guy, and that guy was awful. I needed the car, wanted the car, but I said, as soon as that lease is up, man, I'm taking it back, and we're done here. I had a bad taste in my mouth the entire 3 years or whatever the lease. Took the car back, handed it over. They said, you're good to go. They never even asked. They never even said, hey, you're turning the car in. Why aren't you getting another one? And I would have told them, but they didn't ask. Interesting. They probably asked too many times and got too many negative responses, so they just stopped asking. The seeds of churn are planted early. But just so we're not negative, just so this isn't about being negative, the seeds of massive success can also be planted early. That's a giant pumpkin. That represents massive success. Is that not the way it works in Sweden? We have the ability to really set customers up for big success with us, right? And that starts with understanding what that success needs to look like and then orchestrating and operationalizing that. But again, it starts early. And the way it starts really is making sure that we avoid bad fit customers. I've said it before in different places, and I'm not saying it to be provocative, but it helps that I am. If you are investing in customer success, you've built a customer success organization, you bought my book and other things, you bought customer success software, yet you knowingly allow bad fit customers to be signed, then you should fire your customer success people, cancel your customer success subscription, and keep my book because it's awesome. No, but why are you investing in things that are supposedly about making your customer successful when you knowingly let bad fit customers in the front door? Right? That doesn't make any sense. Yet I see it all the time. We are signing customers that do not have success potential and then handing them over to customer success organization and setting that customer success organization up for failure because there's no way to make a customer that doesn't have success potential successful. It's ridiculous. If the only way that you can hit your numbers or hit your goals or whatever that is by signing bad fit customers, then I don't think you have a business. Something's wrong. So it doesn't make sense. So we need to figure out what does a bad fit customer look like? What does a good fit customer look like? Well, we start with success potential. We're going to get into that a little bit later, go into some detail on that. But you have to acquire customers with success potential if you want to grow. If you want these things that we're talking about today to work, you got to be honest. You got to draw that line in the sand and say, we are not going to go out and acquire customers that do not have the ability to be successful with us right now. Now, if you're a brand new company, that may be different 6 months from now. You know, the definition of a bad fit customer might be different 6 months from now. But right now, you have to be honest about that. It's a lot better to tell a customer, you're not a good fit right now, and 6 months later come back to them and say, by the way, we now have that feature that you absolutely required. We now have we can provide the overall experience that you need. Chances are, 6 months later, it's a really good chance they haven't done anything yet. And now you sign them and they're ready to go. But if you signed them 6 months ago when they were a bad fit and you couldn't get them up and running, you just burned that relationship. And in the B2B world, it's really difficult. I'd say it's impossible. We just sort of count any churned customer. You just count them out. They're done. They're not coming back. So we have to acquire customers with success potential, which means we need to think about this whole idea with our customers as less of a power struggle. You know, there's a lot of times where, again, if we're thinking negative things about our customers, if we say negative things about our customers, certainly behind their back, probably don't say it to them, it's because we've done something wrong. We've chosen to do business in a market that is inappropriate for us. Or we chose not to acquire customers that had success potential, or whatever. It's on us. It's not a power struggle. There's really been this power shift. And I want you guys to think about this. if we go back a few years, the vendors would do things that were less than customer positive. Okay, they would try to, the way that vendors in the past kept customers is they would lock them into multi-year contracts. Multi-year contracts are fine, and they still exist, even in the SaaS world. I mean, that's still a thing. But you're not locking them in to a 3-year contract. You're simply, I mean, if you're locking anything in, it's just the price. That's not what's going to keep a customer around. So we have to get away from thinking about that. We have to understand that the power has really shifted, not just to the customer. I don't think that's the right way to look at it. I think some vendors think that. The customers have all the power now. We got to take that power back. No, that's the wrong way to look at it too. I like to say we both have power in this relationship. In fact, there's a book called The Power Paradox, which is an amazing book. I would highly recommend that you read it. It would explain actually a lot of the stuff that's going on in the U.S. with our presidential election. It also explains, and even that bank, the Wells Fargo controversy. It explains why people who become powerful, why they start doing things that are incongruent with what got them into power. Really interesting book, fantastic book, and it defines power this way. It affected me so much that I actually put this in here. The book is Power Paradox. This is where it comes from. And in a relationship, the author describes power as the capacity to alter the state of others. Again, in a relationship, from a relationship standpoint. Man, I just really dig that. That really resonated with me. If you think about it, you exist to alter the state of your customers. The only reason I'm here talking to you guys is theoretically, the power that I have isn't any sort of power over you. It's just that I have the ability to give you some information that will hopefully alter your state in a positive way. Now, the thing about power is it's not good or bad. It just is, and you can use it for good or evil, right? So power is one of those things that we often equate with negative things, because people that get into power, being the humans that they are, tend to start abusing that power, right? But power in and of itself is not a negative thing. In our situation here, in our context, power is the ability to alter the state of our customers. But you can't take power. I didn't come here today unannounced and say, hey, I'm going to talk to these people and teach them some stuff. That didn't happen. Over a few years, we built some trust. Said, we'd love to have you come out and talk to some awesome folks about how to build an engine of growth. Cool. I was given some power. Now, I was given a little bit of power. Now, hopefully, as I continue to say things that are useful and that resonate, that power will continue, that power exchange, because power requires trust. Power requires that someone initially trusted me. Your customers, your prospects, are going to give you a little bit of trust in exchange. You're gonna teach them something, then they'll give you a little bit more trust, and they'll try your product, and then if they start to see that you're living up to your word, then they will start to expand. But if you don't live up to your word, then that trust erodes, and your customers go away, or they stay, but they're looking for it because maybe your product does help them, but the overall experience is inappropriate, and they're waiting until another product comes along, and then they're going to leave. Power requires trust, and this goes back to the golden rule. If you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I mean, that rule applies, in all sorts of different ways, and I think it really applies here. If we make our customers powerful, then our customers will make us powerful. The question is, how do we make them powerful? Actually, how will they make you powerful? Let's start there. How do our customers make us powerful? Hey, remember these 4 things? This is what we get when we make our customers powerful, and the trust is built. They will stay longer. They will buy more. They will expand internally. They will invite us into other parts of their business, and they will advocate for us. That's how they're going to make us powerful, if we make them powerful. But let's talk about how we make them powerful, because that's the hard part. We make them powerful, guys, by making them successful. Now, I've talked about customer success. I've used that word success several times. One of the reasons I came up with the definition I did was because somebody would say to me, all right, that's cool. What does success mean? And I'd be like, oh, I got to go. Because I'm like, that's a good question. Is it ROI? Is it something more, is it soft? I don't know. I don't know what success means. So I came up with the definition of customer success is when your customers achieve their desired outcome through their interactions with your company. Desired outcome. That was the thing that when I hit on that, it changed everything. It changed my worldview. It changed the growth trajectory of the companies that I've worked with. This is another one of those concepts that I really want you guys to pay close attention to because it could potentially change everything about the way you do business. Desired outcome. So this is the other piece of the customer success definition. So desired outcome at its simplest is what your customers need to achieve and the way they need to achieve it. That's pretty simple. It's these two pieces. What your customer needs to achieve is their required outcome. How they need to achieve it, that's what we call the appropriate experience. We're going to go into this in a lot more detail because, again, this is one of those things that is absolutely critical. And if you got the pre-work, you should have seen something in there that was a desired outcome worksheet. All these things kind of build on themselves. And so I want you to make sure that you do that. Go do that homework. Make sure that you're going through this process of understanding what the desired outcome is for your customers. But a little spoiler about how this works, and we'll get to this in a minute. Every different customer segment is going to have a different desired outcome. They probably share a required outcome, but their appropriate experience is going to be different. And understanding that is the key to scaling, not just your customer success organization, but really the key to scaling your business. So we'll talk about that in more detail. I'm not going to talk a lot about churn because churn is really just a symptom of an underlying disease. And that disease is that your customers are not achieving their desired outcome. So if you have a lot of churn today, and you're trying to figure out how do I reduce churn, and you're looking at tactics and gimmicks and concessions and discounts and things like that, I'll tell you, you're always going to be looking at those things. If churn is your main focus, you're always going to have churn to focus on because you're not solving the underlying disease. Churn is just a symptom. Churn happens when customers don't achieve their desired outcome. Unless they go out of business, maybe if they're acquired, but sometimes that's actually not a reason for churn. Other than that, that's it. There's no other reason for churn except they didn't achieve their desired outcome. Now, the key point about desired outcome is, again, those two pieces, required outcome and appropriate experience. I can actually help you achieve your required outcome, but I can do it in a way that gives you an inappropriate experience, and you're not going to feel successful. So that's something to really keep in mind. And by the way, when I say feel successful, that's actually a list of things that I can check boxes to say, that didn't happen, so I wasn't successful, even though I did actually achieve the required outcome, which is what I mean by your product may do what it needs to, what the customer needs, and for the time being, until there's an appropriate competitor that comes along, they're going to stick with you. But as soon as a competitor comes along that actually gets it and gives them the appropriate experience, they're gone. So right now you might be safe, but really understand that. So we're not going to talk a lot about churn because if you do everything right, churn becomes a non-issue. If you understand, so when I say do things right, it's this. It's understanding that customer success is when your customers achieve their desired outcome through their interactions with your company. And just to kind of hit this home, without customer success, without this focus on customer success-driven growth, you get these things. You get stagnating customers. So even if your customers stay, they're not growing. You get customer churn. Some customers are obviously going to leave. Some will stay, but they will pay you less for the privilege. You will have to give them discounts or concessions, or they will just downsell, or they will just downgrade, trying their best to hold on with your inappropriate experience until something better comes along. Right? They're certainly not going to improve their position with you. Your reputation is going to suffer. Your total addressable market is going to be reduced. Sales friction increases. This is, by the way, when you have salespeople going out and closing bad fit customers. If I was a salesperson that worked for a company that allowed bad fit customers to be signed, or if I work for a sales manager or VP of sales, I would quit. Because at some point, it's going to catch up to us, and it's going to make my job as a salesperson harder. So your sales friction increases, the sales cycles will tend to get longer. Your CAC, your customer acquisition cost increases. Like we said earlier, talent acquisition suffers, and ultimately the value of your company goes down. On the flip side, with customer success, we get expanding customers. They grow, they invite us into other parts of their business. Net revenue retention becomes positive. We get that great reputation, the total addressable market increases, sales friction decreases, all that stuff we talked about. The main thing is, ultimately, you position your company for long-term success by focusing on customer success-driven growth. And customer success-driven growth, again, I told you, it's going to come up several times. This is really important. And this is not, I love talking to groups like this because, customer success people are already bought into this concept, but often they're bought into it at an organizational level. For this stuff to work, this has to be something that the entire company is built around. That's why I said the best companies have customer success as their operating philosophy, and the best of the best have it as their operating model. This is actually how you unlock the value from your business model. If you think about it that way. So this really is important for you guys to understand. And again, I over the years we've said, is there a better term for this than customer success? But I actually don't think so, because it's got the two things that are really important: our customers and making sure they're successful. So when your customers succeed, you succeed. Okay, that's that. So we kind of laid the foundation. That is the foundation for your growth. That really is the key to having an efficient engine of growth. But let's talk about how to develop an ideal customer profile. Now, how many of you did the pre-work developing your ideal customer profile? Man, that's awesome. Wow. You guys in the front row didn't see everybody behind you raise their hand. It's amazing. It's okay. Hopefully after this, you'll see the value in doing this kind of work. So ideal customer profile is one of those things that I get asked about all the time. What's the best customer for a SaaS product? I'm like, why is that a question now? It was a bad question 10 years ago. Certainly now when everything is SaaS, right? So we need to move away from thinking that there's this universal ideal customer definition. In fact, there's not even an ideal customer definition that's going to be universal for you. This is going to be something that's always a sort of living and breathing thing. And something called FOMO, the fear of missing out, is going to try to keep you from locking down on an ideal customer. FOMO is going to tell you, you're going to miss out. If you lock down on just one customer, man, you're going to miss out on all those others. But you have to understand that right now, if you are trying to be all things to everybody, if you're trying to go really wide, cast a wide net, have your message, normalize your message across all potential customers, I guarantee you right now, those that you would consider your ideal customer, they are not doing business with you, because they're going to your website or they're talking to your salespeople and they're saying, this isn't for me. So ideal customer is really important to figure out, but again, it takes some emotional intelligence to get past FOMO and start doing things deliberately. So that's important to understand. And it's the way that I do this is we'll say, let's develop an ideal customer profile, not to say this is the ideal customer that the only customer we're ever going to do business with. That's ridiculous. Let's just say for a particular situation, so we say situational awareness. I watch a lot of survival shows just in case I'm ever stuck in the middle of the woods. And they say situational awareness is critical. And when it comes to ideal customer profile, the same thing applies. Situational awareness is absolutely critical. What we want to do is define our situation. That's pretty simple. What's our goal and what's our time frame? So we say for, over the next 90 days, we want to acquire 100 new customers, or we want to acquire X amount of revenue. There you go. Now develop an ideal customer profile for that situation. That should ease any of that fear of missing out, and making you think, oh, gosh, this is the only customer I'll ever do business with. I don't want to lock down like that. No, it's just saying, look, for this amount of time to reach this goal, this is the customer we're going to go after. In fact, to say over this amount of time, this is our goal, it really requires you to get deliberate on a type of customer you're going to go after. And we'll talk about exactly what that means. There are basically 7 inputs into ideal customer profile. And the first 3, ready, willing, enable, those are pretty self-explanatory. The others are success potential, which we'll talk about in a big way. Acquisition efficiency, ascension potential, which is really account expansion, and advocacy potential are also important. So we have to understand what our goals are, and we have to understand the time frame. So ready is just that our customers have a problem, they know it, and they're ready to take action. If I want to acquire customers, let's say for the next 90 days, I want 100 new customers. If I'm creating a new product category and nobody even knows that they have the problem that they have, and they certainly don't know that there's a solution for it, I'm going to have a lot of trouble, right? So some of this, if you're inventing something from scratch, some of this stuff is going to be a little bit more challenging to apply. Doesn't mean it's not applicable, it just means it's going to be challenging. You may have to expand your time horizon there. If you're iterating on something that's already been done, you're bringing a new version, a better version, then this stuff is, people already know they have these problems. They're willing. They know that they have the problem. They're willing to take action, right? That's pretty obvious. Able. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Are they able to pay us money to use the product? So they're ready, they're willing, but they don't have any money, or they're ready and they're willing, and this isn't, right now is not their buying cycle. Again, if over the next 90 days, my goal is to acquire 100 customers, but the buying cycle for my product, for a particular customer segment, let's say I sell to education, in the U.S., if you sell into higher ed, you often run into a buying cycle that starts around, I think, August or something like that. If that's not within the 90 days that you're trying to reach this goal, then probably you shouldn't be selling to that customer. Little things like that. This isn't necessarily stuff that you don't know. It's just how, we're applying this in a more structured way. So ready, willing, enable. Success potential is one, obviously, that I've already talked about several times. This actually, I'm probably going to carve this out of ideal customer profile and just make it a standalone thing because it's so absolutely critical. But the thing is, really, this should be something that's just there in general. But if your situation in your goal for that time frame in your situation is, I want more customers that will advocate for us, or I want more customers that have expansion potential, maybe again for investors, they want more of that in our customer base, then obviously success potential becomes quite important. But it's really its own thing. If we do this right, we get to this point, and success potential, certainly, if we acquire customers with success potential, they'll stay longer and they'll buy more, right? That's, out of these 4 things, that's really going to be critical. Not everybody with success potential, not every customer with success potential is going to expand internally, for the simple reason maybe it doesn't apply anywhere else in the business. They could advocate for us externally, certainly, but we just need to understand that. The other thing is success potential is just potential. It just means that they could be successful with us. Doesn't mean that they will be. So no guarantees, right? We still need to operationalize that. If you have customers that you acquired that don't have success potential and they churn out, that's a bad thing. That's never good, actually, because it cost money to acquire them. There were resources in there to try to make them successful. They churned out. We can say, well, we shouldn't have acquired them in the first place. So it's hard to really place the blame anywhere but on our ability to close customers that we shouldn't. If a customer churns out that had success potential, then that is something we should take the blame for. That really is something that we should be able to fix. We should have been able to make them successful because they had that success potential. But it's just potential. Success potential has 5 inputs: technical fit, functional fit, competence fit, experience fit, and cultural fit. The blue really represents the required outcome when we're thinking about desired outcome. The orange really represents the appropriate experience. Technical fit, is there a requirement at a technical level that if the customer doesn't have that, they're not going to be able to use our product? If you are built on another product, if your product is an add-on for another product, if your product is an add-on for Gmail, and they don't use Gmail, they probably don't have success potential with your product, even if you could hack it somehow and make it work. It's probably not worth it to anybody. That seems so obvious. But why is that up here? Because that happens far too often. We close customers that we shouldn't close because, oh, we'll figure out a way to make it work. That's post-sales. We'll figure that stuff out. The reality is that's never going to work. And if it does, it is an edge case, and we shouldn't be building things around edge cases, right? We shouldn't be building things around situations that may or may not occur on a frequent basis. Functional fit. Functional fit is one of those things where, do we have the key functionality, the stuff that without it is a non-starter? Do we have that which is going to make our customer successful? If I sell a marketing product to agencies, and there's not the ability to kind of roll up everything and get one view of all of my clients, then even if that marketing product could work, to do the thing that it needs to do for each of my clients, the fact that as an agency I don't have that roll-up functionality means it's a non-starter for me. We have to be aware of that. We have to be honest about that and say, right now we don't have these key functions that are probably going to affect who we can sell to. Competence fit. If I am selling a product that requires some sort of expertise and the companies don't have that expertise, they could functionally use my product, they could go through the motions, but are they actually going to achieve their desired outcome? Are they actually even going to achieve the required outcome? By the way, the required outcome is not the use of your product. Sorry to say, guys, nobody buys your product to use it just to use it. It's a means to an end. Even a game is just a means to an end. That end is entertainment, wasting time. So we have to understand that in order to get the value out of our relationship, your customers have to have all of these things. And competency is really important. That actually is, we call it a success gap. And it's the ability, like I said, for your customers to functionally do what they need to do and still end up not doing what they need to do. So an example is email marketing. It's one I always use because it's so easy for all of us to understand whether we've ever done it or not. If I have an email marketing product, I can see that my customer built a list or imported a list. They created an email. They wrote the copy. They put in a subject line. They put in a call to action, a link to something else. They sent that out. Is that successful? Was that customer successful? If I'm looking at only product usage, I might fall into that trap and say that customer was successful. But the customer didn't sign up for your product to send an email. They had as a part of their desired outcome, they had a required outcome. And that was probably something else, right? It was more people to their event. It was more people to buy their products, something. They chose to do this through email marketing. The fact that they could functionally use the product and still not achieve their required outcome is a success gap. And you have to be honest about those success gaps that exist in your world and figure out how to bridge them. It's really important. So that's competence fit. And then, so whether they have it or they're willing to invest in it, right? So maybe you offer training, or you can partner with somebody that offers training. If they don't have it internally and they're not willing to acquire that expertise, then they're a bad fit. They're not going to be successful. Experience fit. This is, can we provide the appropriate experience for them? An example of an appropriate experience is, do I have to have 24/7 phone support because they're an enterprise client and that's what they need? If I can't do that, I can't do business with that customer. Not going to give them the appropriate experience. It even starts earlier. I was in Ireland a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to some folks that told me they sell into different parts of the EU, and One place they try not to sell into is Spain. Because in Spain, you have to have like 3-hour lunches with people. Because it's very much a relationship-based culture. And they're like, we don't have the resources to go out and spend 3 hours with customers. Say, okay, so right now, you can't do business, you shouldn't actively pursue business in Spain. Now, if a customer from Spain comes to you, you're not going to turn them away necessarily, but you're not going to spend any time and resources and energy and money trying to do business in a geography that is a place where you can't provide the appropriate experience, even starting with sales. So we have to think about all of those different interactions across the entire customer lifecycle and understand that if we can't provide certain things, we need to be honest about that and aware of that and make sure that we're not acquiring customers that have that experience requirement. And then finally, cultural fit. This could be anything. This is a little bit softer. This could be anything from, I don't want to do business with people that are rude and demanding. Like maybe that's, I don't want that. I don't want my people to have to deal with that. So right there, if that comes up, if anything like that comes up in the sales process, I can't check that box and say that there's a cultural fit. It could be other things like if you host videos, you could basically say, we're not going to allow certain content, pornography, things like that. As long as it's legal, there's no reason that you couldn't allow those things. It's that you're choosing not to. That's part of your cultural fit. So right there, you know that certain customers are not going to be an appropriate fit. So success potential is an incredibly powerful tool, and it doesn't require anything more than like a notepad list. This isn't anything that requires a lot of tools. Like here's a list of the things that indicate whether or not a customer has success potential, and if they don't, we shouldn't sign them. Very simple. All right, acquisition efficiency. So this is really, again, going back to this idea of, let's say over the next 90 days, I need to acquire 100 customers. If I can't figure out where my customers are, if I can't get in front of them, if I can't really identify who they are, it's going to be very difficult to achieve that goal. So I need to find customers that are easy to find. I need to identify customers that are easy to find, easy to get in front of, relatively fast to close. If my goal is 100 customers in the next 90 days, I better not go after customers that take 6 months to close. Obvious, but we sometimes forget about those things. And some of that you might not know going into it, but if you've done business in that industry before, or you can probably figure out ways of getting that intel, then we should be able to know. Ascension potential. I like the term ascension, but account expansion is what most people call it. But really, we want to get their customers on that ascension path. That includes upsell, cross-sell, land and expand. That's lifetime value growth. This also takes into consideration that age-old question of, do I sell to enterprises or do I sell to small, medium-sized businesses? If I need to get more customers on the books that have expansion potential, then I need to really think long and hard about whether or not I want to go after small companies. If I sell 10 licenses or 10 seats to a company with 10 people, so 100% penetration into that company, what's it going to take for me to sell one more seat to that company? They have to grow by 10%, if my math is correct. If I, on the other hand, sell 10 seats to a department in a large enterprise, for them to add 2 or 5 seats, it's easy. I mean, they're moving people around all the time. That's actually pretty easy. And if my product isn't something that is department specific necessarily, then the expansion potential is greatly improved. So we have to be honest about that. And this really does, it gives you a way of looking at, should we go after those smaller customers? If our pricing model is based on a per seat basis, we're going to be limited by those smaller customers. So we might want to look, especially if our product is really only good for small, medium-sized companies, then we really need to think about our pricing model, and is that going to limit our growth, right? Can we actually grow? And again, Ascension is part of the customer's success. It's not necessarily caused by it. Advocacy potential. This is, will our customers actually go out and advocate for us? this is where we talk about virality. And even in a B2B world, things can go viral. Certainly we've seen that with things like Slack or even Yammer, communications, things like that. See it in project management tools. Certainly, I would even classify something like Workday, which is started out as just a human capital management or human resources product, that really it required everybody, or it allowed everybody in the company to sort of self-serve, and manage their own HR records. That was a great example of land and expand into the company, and then now everybody gets exposure to it, and now when they start to bring other add-ons, everybody's already exposed to it, and it's like, oh, by the way, did you know we could do financials? Well, I've already had a great experience just with my HR stuff. Yeah, let's talk about that. So there's lots of different opportunities there for intra and intercompany virality. Intra-company meaning, that idea of just land and expand within one company, but even with products that sort of cross boundaries of other companies. That's one of the reasons Slack outperformed something like Yammer. Yammer was acquired by Microsoft for like 1.3 billion, had amazing growth, but one of the things that it sort of lacked was the ability to collaborate across company boundaries. Slack, obviously, if you guys have ever used it, doesn't have that limitation, and that really facilitated its massive growth. Certainly not just a B2B tool, but something to think about. The way that I like to approach this is you want to infiltrate your customer's social network. And I don't mean social network in the way of like Twitter or LinkedIn. The way that they work with other people in real life. How can you inject your product into more of those situations? Sometimes that requires you to actually go out and watch how your users and your customers do things. Do they print out a report from your system and manually, deliver it? Do they just print a PDF, make a PDF, and then email that out? If they're doing those things, they should be doing that through your system, right? So now everybody's sort of getting touched by the system and becomes reliant on it. That's what we want. So advocacy happens through both usage, but also people going out and actually advocating on your behalf, saying how great you are. That's where we get into something called social proof. Here's the thing. So if over the next 90 days, I need to acquire 10 customers that will advocate for us, I probably shouldn't do business with like government contractors that can't even admit they exist. Right? So little things like that, just making sure that we are acquiring customers. I'll tell you a secret. If you want more advocates and it's possible, you'll want to sell to marketers. Marketers understand the power of advocacy, so they're going to be more willing to advocate for you. By the way, they might also want their name somewhere on a website in their picture, right? So they're much more willing to do that. So you kind of understand that, and you take that and run with it. Here's the thing. So those are all the different inputs into your ideal customer profile. Why is this so important? It's important because you really can't know what marketing channels, what pitch, pricing, messaging, language, value prop. You can't really know which one of those to use until you're clear on your ideal customer profile. Anything else is just normalized and is probably not going to resonate as strongly as you would like, right? So we can accept that. We can say, I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with the results normalized messaging is going to give us. By the way, when you try and normalize something across all your different customer segments, you end up usually just talking about yourself. And that nobody cares about you, at least not in the early days. If you're not a huge brand, they don't really care about you. What they care about is that you care about them, that you are positioning yourself as something that can help them achieve their desired outcome. One of the quick things that anytime somebody comes to me and says, hey, we're having a hard time acquiring customers, or we have a lot of churn, first thing I do is pull up their website, not just for research, but I want to see what's the first thing that pops up. Almost always, it's a screenshot. It's a picture of their product rather than a picture of their customer. And that just tells me right there where their mind's at. So, something to think about. So, ideal customer profile, really important. I would encourage you guys to go back and do that pre-work, although it won't be pre-work, but do the work that was sent. Go through the success potential worksheet. Make sure that you understand. Make sure that you then give that to sales. If sales is closing bad fit customers, sometimes it's nefarious. Sometimes it's a thing where they know what they're doing. A lot of times it's actually not. Nobody's ever really told them, this is what a bad fit customer looks like. Don't close these. The best companies, really clear on that. In fact, if you sign a bad fit customer, first of all, customer success will often have veto power, right? That's just, it's not going to happen. But if you close a bad fit customer and they churn out early, you don't get your full commission. So there's some disincentives there as well. But you don't need all of that. Incentives don't drive behavior. Leaders do. And leaders might use incentives, but leaders actually drive behavior. And if you understand that, you'll tell your salespeople, this is what a good fit customer looks like. This is what a customer with success potential looks like. Only sign those. And if the only thing you can do to hit your quota is sign bad fit customers, you might be a good hustler. You might be a good closer. You might be a good salesperson, some people would say. But what you won't be is working here any longer. That sends a pretty strong message, right? We don't sign bad fit customers. It sets everybody up for failure, including the customer. The most important is the customer. So let's talk about desired outcome. Actually, we'll take a break. Take about a 10-minute break. Let you guys get up, stretch, and we'll be back in like 10 minutes. Cool. Yeah.
Innan vi lämnar över till Lincoln igen så tänkte jag bara säga att vi kommer köra lite mingel och drinkar här efter, så hoppas alla är kvar. Och Lincoln kommer vara med. Så stanna kvar. Stick inte direkt.
Awesome. All right. So hopefully you rested, you rehydrated, and we're ready to go because we're just getting started. No, we're about halfway through. So, all right, but hopefully we got you thinking in the right direction here. You know, this is all about, building, like you said, building that engine of growth. Well, one of the key factors we talked about earlier that we're going to focus on is desired outcome. Now, again, this I sent you, or we provided you with a worksheet on desired outcome discovery. And desired outcome, remember, just as a refresher, so in case you forgot, customer success is when your customers achieve their desired outcome through their interactions with your company, okay? So interactions happen across the customer lifecycle, and they start early. Desired outcome is really the main thing to focus on here. And we already kind of hit on some high-level ideas around it. But this is, if customer success is a growth engine, this is the fuel. This is the fuel that really makes this whole thing work. I tweeted this a while ago. You can follow me on Twitter at Lincoln Murphy if you like. I tweeted this a while ago. It got some traction. Twitter is my social network of choice. It's where I think even this morning I went on a rant about account management. So if you follow me, you'll see things like that. I said you can focus on adoption, retention, expansion, or advocacy. What I mean is you can focus on one of those things at a time, and often that's what we do. Retention becomes an issue, so we focus on that. Or we want customers to advocate for us, so we focus on that. You can focus on one of those things, or you can focus on the customer's desired outcome and get all of those. That's the point. Just like churn is a symptom of of a deeper disease, and that disease is your customers are not achieving their desired outcome. The same thing goes for, focusing on just adoption or retention or advocacy or something like that. If you only focus on those things, it's always going to be something you have to focus on, right? You have to worry about. You have to really try, because it's not actually going to work, because we're not really taking into consideration the customer's desired outcome. So, desired outcome, like I said, this is one of those things that once I just happened onto this idea, it changed everything from my perspective. It changed everything for the companies that I worked with. It truly is a transformational concept, and it's really easy to understand, and actually not that difficult to start implementing in your business. But you have to first understand it. You have to first really grasp why it's important. So let's talk about it again. So desired outcome is made up of required outcome and appropriate experience. What your customer needs to achieve and the way they need to achieve it. Very often, especially with software products, we tend to focus only on the required outcome. We tend to only focus on what your customers need to do. We think the entire customer experience is really made up inside of your UI or your API or whatever. And that's not true. Even if you have a full-blown UI that's just fantastic and it's a great user experience, the reality is there are things that are happening outside of your product. We talked about success gaps earlier. Your customers may be able to functionally use your product but not achieve their desired outcome, not actually even achieve their required outcome. Sometimes that's a problem. But they can achieve their required outcome, but the experience is inappropriate. That's gonna cause problems. So we have to understand this, and to do this, we're going to add some more things to this chart. So required outcome is obviously there, and remember, it's not the use of your product. Your customers need to achieve something. They have a reason for using your product and that's it. So they need to do something. They choose a method to do it. Okay, so very quickly, because you're in their world, very quickly we start to understand what the appropriate experience is going to be like, because they've chosen to do business with you because they think that you're going to help them achieve their, at the very least, their required outcome. So go back to that email marketing idea that we talked about earlier, that example. If I need to get more people to my event and I have their email addresses, what method would I choose? I'd probably choose email marketing, because I already have your email addresses and I need to make sure I get people to my event. I could, however, and you guys need to be really honest with yourselves about what the alternatives are. If I wanted more people to this event, I could probably go down on the street and hand out flyers. I might not get the right people to the event, but I might be able to get more people. But that's probably not appropriate for this type of event. So I choose, in that instance, to use email marketing. Now, I am a customer, or I represent a customer segment. I'm going to have unique characteristics. Now, maybe, depending upon, if I'm a really big company, I'm really strategically important, those might be literally the characteristics of my company. But generally, it's going to be the characteristics of a customer segment. Okay, so we've logically segmented our customers. They're going to have these shared characteristics. Those characteristics are going to tell us what the appropriate experience should be. This is not a process of dictating to your customers what their desired outcome is, what their appropriate experience is. This is a discovery process. Somebody asked me on Twitter yesterday, hey, what's the question that we ask to understand the desired outcome of the customer? Because I can't just ask them, right? Well, it's not just one question, and it's not just questions, it's observation. It's really getting to know your customers, understanding what's going on in their world, understanding what they do literally on a daily basis. Who do they interact with? It's understanding all of those things, understanding the adjacent products that they buy that are at the same level. The same people in their company buy those. The pricing is similar. It's not a competitive product, it's just adjacent to us. It's understanding all of those things so that we can get a better idea of what's going on in their world, so we know what that appropriate experience is. If you don't know what your customer's required outcome is, I don't even know what you're doing. So you at least should know that. I understand that you might not understand the appropriate experience. That's going to require you to go out and do some discovery, right? And then be honest about the fact that, look, I can't provide these things. So I know that if that's part of a customer segment's appropriate experience, we can't do that. So we have to be honest about that and know that customer doesn't have success potential with us. So those are the inputs into desired outcome. But let's walk through a couple of examples so we can better understand this. I use air travel a lot because when I talk to companies or talk to groups where maybe they're technology companies, when I bring up technology companies as examples, we want to sort of start just really comparing them to us. So I talk about something that if we've ever flown once, we're all familiar with this, and we can kind of understand where this fits into our life. I travel a lot, so this is like super, like always top of mind with me. And we'll just use air travel as an example. So the required outcome. The required outcome is that I need to get from point A to point B safely and quickly. So right there, and I gotta tell you, I work on slides like this on the plane a lot, and I always hope that I'm right. But so point A to point B safely and quickly, at least in the US and Europe and luckily everywhere that I've traveled, commercial airline is what you would go to for safety and speed. Maybe in Europe you could do trains or something like that. Certainly in the US that's a non-starter. So we go to air travel. Now, as a business traveler, and just to be clear, I'm not like a commuter. I don't just live 30 minutes away and I go get on a plane every day and do that. My flights are like 3 hours at least, if not longer. I can't have that be downtime. In fact, some of my most productive time is when I'm on the plane, so I'm not getting distracted. So I'm thinking of a business traveler from my perspective. I need to be able to work. I don't have any time to eat, so maybe I need to, there needs to be food service. You see, those characteristics start to describe or define really what my appropriate experience should be. I need assigned seating. I need Wi-Fi, unless it's like, over transcontinental or something like that. But even then, sometimes it's available, and that's awesome. I need leg room so that I can actually work. Always afraid when I'm typing up that that person in front of me is going to come back and smash my laptop. And I need, food service. That describes what I, as a business traveler, need. If I don't get those things, so let's say there's an airline in the US called Southwest. I'm sure there are similar, they call it a low fare carrier. Actually, it's just a no frills carrier. Their fees or their fares are not necessarily that low. They don't have assigned seating. They kind of line everybody up and you get on in groups, and there's no assigned seating. So if you aren't the first person on the plane, or if there's already people on the plane, because sometimes they have connecting flights, then the one good seat is already taken. And there's like one good seat on most of Southwest jets. It's by an exit row, and there's not a seat in front of you. So it's like amazing. That's like the first class seat. If you can get it, it's awesome. But unless you're first in line, you're not going to get it. So if you don't get it, you don't have any room to work. Like literally, it's terrible. Their Wi-Fi is not available on most of their planes. They might give you a soda and like 3 peanuts, and that's it. Now, I know when I get off of a Southwest Airlines flight that they have helped me achieve my required outcome. Absolutely know that. You know how I know that? Because when I'm getting off the plane, I'm swearing, so I know I'm alive, but I also know that it was a terrible experience. So Southwest and I try to avoid each other. I'm not their ideal customer. And they know that, and they would never try to come after me. They would not spend one resource trying to come after me in any big way. Sometimes, the way that things work out, we run into each other, and then we go our separate ways. Never to speak of it again. So that's a business traveler. So we have the required outcome, we have the appropriate experience. At the same time, we have a family going on vacation. They have the same required outcome. Get from point A to B safely and quickly. They could just pile into the car and go on a road trip, but that's actually more dangerous, right? That's actually bad, and it's probably maybe even more expensive with the price of gas, hotels and things like that. So point A to B safely and quickly, so they choose air travel. But the reality is that they are looking to save money. They're really just focused on enjoying the destination. The flight itself, that's just a means to an end. That means that they need cheap fares. In terms of entertainment, they'll bring their own. They'll load up the iPad for the kids or whatever. And maybe they need some snacks and drinks, but that's it. No frills. We both have the same required outcome. We have very different appropriate experiences. And when it comes to commercial air travel, some platforms serve both customers, right? Some customers are going to go to the front and have an experience that is appropriate for them. And some customers are going to go to the back and have an experience that's appropriate for them on the same platform. Some companies have said, no, this is Southwest. We're going to go after this type of customer. We're going to do this one thing. If somebody said, you talk about fear of missing out, right? They're saying, I don't care about all these other types of travelers. That's not who we're after. We're going after. We're going to go after this one type of traveler. One of the most successful companies in the world, because they drew that line in the sand and they don't have to worry about that. So I'm not saying one way is better than the other, but just recognize that if you are going to serve multiple customer segments, you need to give them the appropriate experience. So we'll go back to that email marketing idea. So I need more people to my event. That is my required outcome. Your customers have a required outcome. That again is not the use of your product. And we have to really kind of get our ego out of the way and just remember that your customers are using your product, are doing business with your company for a reason, and that reason is not to use your product. It's to achieve something else. It's to achieve their desired or their required outcome. This part of the desired outcome. They need more people to their event, so they're going to, because they already have email addresses, because they have experience with email marketing, whatever, they're going to choose that method of achieving that required outcome. But let's say you have a customer that's an early stage startup. We'll say it's an early stage technology startup. They are really big. They have the DIY mentality. They'll do it yourself. They don't really have any money, and they are definitely a tech first type of company, right? Because that's the resources they have internally. They can write code all day long. The appropriate experience for that type of customer may be just an API. We could just give them an API. We give them some really lightweight documentation, maybe a Slack channel for support. Everything is self-service, good to go. The same required outcome, get more people to my event, but with a Fortune 500 department of business users, their characteristics are, it just has to work. Right? I don't have time to mess around with this stuff. I have more time I have more money than time, and I'm not really technology forward. Right? There's certain characteristics that we would have to think about. The appropriate experience for them may be a graphical interface, full-blown, very polished graphical interface, 24/7 telephone support, maybe the ability to sell on a 3-year contract, and maybe that happens with a higher touch sales process. That's the appropriate experience. But this happens on the same platform. 2 different types of customers. You could do one of 3 things. You could understand the appropriate experience for your different customers and choose to provide that. Or say, I can't provide this, I can only do the API and the lightweight documentation and the Slack channel for support. So I'm only going to go after early stage startups. That's fine. You can choose to provide the appropriate experience, or you can choose to provide the appropriate experience only for one, still try to go after the others and provide them with an inappropriate experience so that they're not going to be successful. Or, and this is what a lot of companies do, try to normalize the experience across all customer segments and end up with something that doesn't resonate with anybody. And that's often what happens. Or what happens is we do something for one customer segment. Maybe we weren't really deliberate about going after that customer segment, but it just so happened that somebody, an influencer in one area said, this is really good for this type of company, and then those companies started buying our product, and that's great. And it works, and the appropriate experience is there, and we take that and we try to force that on everybody else, and it just doesn't really resonate the way it did with that one customer segment. But most of the time, it's let's try to normalize something that works for everybody. And just like in your outward marketing, where you're trying, if you're trying to be all things to everybody, you end up being no things to nobody. You do the same with your customers. You end up having an experience that is inappropriate. So if we can understand that, I'm telling you guys, just thinking about it like this, thinking about what has to go into ensuring the customers are successful, understanding what goes into desired outcome, this could change everything. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. So how do you think about this? Again, I just want to be really clear. Desired outcome, especially the whole thing about the appropriate experience, is that it's appropriate to a certain customer segment. So the appropriate experience, I call it appropriate because it's appropriate. It's not great. It's not modern. It's not high touch. It's appropriate. If we understand what the appropriate experience is for the customer segment, then we will provide just what they need. I hear all the time, we want to over-deliver. And in fact, over-delivering is one of the key reasons scaling is hard, because we over-deliver for low-revenue customers that don't expect what we're giving them in the first place. Now they do, because we messed up. We mismanaged expectations. They didn't expect, if they're paying you $50 a month, they didn't expect those 3 hours of consulting you're giving them every week. But now they do. You are over-delivering, and that's going to keep you from being able to scale. So if we understand the appropriate experience, then we will simply deliver what is appropriate, and we won't over-deliver for low-revenue customers and under-deliver for those high-revenue or strategic customers that need us. Most of the time, that's not a problem. We don't have a problem giving our high-value customers what they need. It's that we tend to also give our low-revenue customers too much. And customers will take what we give them in that scenario. They didn't expect it. It's awesome. They don't need it knowing what they're paying, but they're going to take it. They're not going to say, no, please don't give me that free consulting, right? So we have to think about that. The biggest problem I see in terms of scalability is exactly that. It's over optimizing for customers that don't need it. So what we need to think about is, from a customer segmentation standpoint, and from a customer success standpoint and appropriate experience, for every product you have, you're going to have several different customer segments. So if you have several products, you're going to have different customer segments for each product, and they may not be the same customer segment across your different products. So that's something to be really careful about. We don't ever want to get into a situation where, because we've defined customer segments for one product, that a similar or an adjacent product is going to have similar customer segments. It may or may not. So for each product, we define the customer segment, and then underneath that, there might be personas that we also have to take into consideration. Small customers, the individual people, the personas in those companies, tend to be very closely tied to the company itself. So when we're talking about desired outcome, we can usually just talk about it at the company level. Bigger companies, and all that is tempered with the reality in your world, bigger companies tend to have personas that, while they care about the required outcome for the company, what they're trying to achieve, themselves, they have their own desired outcome, right? I as the person that brought the product into the company, I just want to make sure that my investment or my spend was worth it. The person that's actually doing the work just needs to get their job done, right? The results, we all want the results, but individually, their desired outcome is different from that of the company, and so we need to understand those differences. If you have multiple products, like I said, you'll need to do this several times, and I know that I forgot to tell you that I'm not here to make less work for you, but ultimately, we want to make sure that we're doing the right things. Rather than customer segment, another way that you can look at this, it's still customer segmentation, but a better way to look at it is experience segmentation. This idea that all of our customers may share a required outcome. Very often that's exactly the case. We may have different required outcomes across companies, across customers, but for the most part, probably your customers all share that required outcome. So go back to the airline example, but they're going to have a different appropriate experience. And then the personas within those are going to have different required outcome and different appropriate experience. So I think this is a better way to look at it, a better way to think about it. You're still ultimately segmenting your customers, but what this does is it makes sure that you're segmenting your customers based on experience, their experience, rather than something else. We often see customers being segmented based on revenue, based on, low revenue customers get this, high revenue customers get this. Some of that's obviously, it's going to be there if, based on what their appropriate experience is. If their appropriate experience is high touch, they're probably paying us more. But I want to make sure that we're segmenting things based on the customers and not based on our view of them. Make sense? So the same thing, if you have multiple required outcomes, you're gonna have to do this. This could be for the same product. If your product does several different things, you may end up having different required outcomes. So it could be for the same product, but more than likely it's gonna be different products that are represented here. You may actually end up with a situation where you have the single product with different required outcomes as maybe the initial use case that somebody starts using your product for. They have a certain required outcome. As they grow, as they expand, they're going to start using your product to achieve another required outcome. Now that's an expansion opportunity, right? Which means sometimes we need to get really clear on what is their initial use case. And if they come in with this initial use case, what is the most logical next use case for them? That becomes their ascension path. That's the key to expansion. So you might have 3 or 4 different initial use cases. That's sort of their entry point into the relationship with you. And then from there's going to be a logical next step for them, a logical next required outcome that they're going to need to achieve. This is where we're thinking about the customer life cycle and really operationalizing around the customer's success. So some of this still is, this is a chart that I'm continuing to optimize myself because I want to be able to explain this appropriately. And I hope, I saw a lot of nodding, so I'm going to assume that means you guys understand this. This sort of thinking, this initial use case way of thinking, and really basing the experience of the customer off of that is another quite transformative idea. Now, in the work that that was sent out, you see something like this. There's a spreadsheet that basically allows you to go through the discovery process of your desired outcome. You can see the required outcome is, in this case, just ensured email delivery for customers. The method is that you want to validate the email addresses. So this is obviously for a product that validates email addresses. And then we have the characteristics of the customer and the appropriate experience. So you go through that process. You also do that for each of the personas, and you guys are going to be in a much better place when it comes to understanding how to make your customers successful. Right? It's pretty simple and pretty simple idea. Powerful. Simple ideas are often quite powerful. Now you have to go actually apply this thinking, right? And that's where the rubber hits the road. It becomes, it's not always as easy as it is to just explain this stuff. But if you understand how powerful it is, you'll work through that process, right? You'll be dedicated to making this happen. So let's talk about some ideas on actually getting your customers in the first place. All right, so going back to that ideal customer profile, understanding how to get them in the first place. Most of the time, so I'm going to talk about marketing. Some of this is sales. It's just kind of a general overview of how to get in front of your best customers. What your actual sales process looks like, whether it's self-service, whether it's high touch, obviously will dictate exactly how you go about this. But hopefully this will get you thinking in the right direction. Most people start with tactics. If you are really good at AdWords at another company, and you come to the company you're at, or you start another you start a company at your last company, AdWords is what worked really well. What are the chances you're going to focus on AdWords as your main way to get in front of your customers? Probably pretty good. But that may not be appropriate. That may not be the right way to get in front of your customers. So instead of starting with tactics, let's start with your customers. From there, we can start to understand how we're going to get in front of them. If we start with tactics, we may get in front of them, we may not. Starting with the customer allows you to target specific customers rather than, just using whatever tactic you're used to. I love this quote. Enter the conversation already taking place in your customer's mind. Think about that. Enter the conversation already taking place in your customer's mind. This quote by Robert Collier. Anybody ever heard of Robert Collier? He's an amazing marketer. It doesn't surprise me. He was doing his marketing in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And he wrote a book that came out in 1937 called the Robert Collier Letter Book. And it's basically all of his direct mail letters. And you know why he said that? He said he had to figure out a way to cut through all the noise. In the late 1800s. This applies so much now. I always say the quote first and then tell you the date, so you're like, otherwise you might not pay attention to it. But it's so important. This is so much more important today than ever. And how do we do that? Well, if we think about their desired outcome, what is their desired outcome? It's what they need to achieve, the way they need to achieve it. That's the conversation going on in their mind. So how do we cut through the noise? No matter what our medium for getting in front of them is, we cut through the noise by talking about their desired outcome. I'm telling you guys, no matter what you're doing, whatever the tactic is, this is important. Another quote that I like from James Joyce, this hipster dude from Ireland. I saw him at a coffee shop. In the particular is contained the universal. I actually came about that quote from a story on the radio. They were talking about a comedian that is huge in France. And he wanted to be, so, the US is basically where comedy, stand-up comedy, started. So he was really big in France, but he wanted to go to the US and make it big. And so he went to the US and he started talking about US stuff. What's the deal with apartments in New York? And people were laughing a little bit. And so they were talking to other comedians. And this comedian, Colin Quinn, said what he needs to do is talk about himself, what's going on in his world, Because as crazy as it sounds, even though he was like originally from Jordan and then, a comedian in France and now he's in the US, talking about his backstory, there's actually some universal truths that will come out, right? And we can all actually relate to that. So that was the quote. In the particular is contain the universal. So when I talk about getting deliberate and really focusing on a specific ideal customer and speaking their language, you may be speaking directly to a customer in this segment or in this market or whatever. But other people can read into that their own examples, right? Their own experience. And they might actually want to do business with you. If you try to normalize your message across everybody, then again, you're probably just going to end up talking about yourself, your company, your product, your features and functionality, and they're going to say, I don't know you guys don't really understand me, I'm going to go find a company that does. So it's really interesting. Actually, when you start narrowing your focus on certain ideal customers, you actually end up attracting others that you're not even going after specifically, but they can see their experience in what you're talking about with the customers that you are targeting. So in the particulars contain the universal. Now, what marketing channels do you actually use? What sales channels do you actually use? Do you do outreach? Do you do inbound marketing? Whatever that is, when you get specific on a customer type, those channels will start to appear. Now, not magically necessarily, you're going to have to do some work, but by knowing a specific customer, you're going to be able to go out and say, where do they get their information? Who do they trust? What blogs do they read? Who do they follow on Twitter? Whatever that is. You're going to be able to understand better how to get in front of them, right? So those channels will start to appear. And then you're going to understand how to basically go about getting your product in front of them through these different distribution channels. So some tactics of distribution. I'm going to go through these kind of quick. These are just things to kind of get your mind going around this if you hadn't thought about some of these opportunities. So partnerships, intermediaries, again, you can start to see very quickly how knowing exactly who you're selling to is going to help you understand which of these matter. Like if I sell to people that buy primarily through intermediaries, I should probably know that they only do business through distributors or only through there's people that they trust who sell those products as an affiliate. Like we need to know that. But how can I know that if I don't even know who I'm targeting, who I'm going after? So intermediaries or joint ventures or other types of partnerships or integrations. Integrations now, a lot of customers are coming in through things like Segment or Zapier or any of the other types of integration hubs. So whereas before that was purely a technology play, we need to hook into this other product, now it's actually a customer acquisition channel. I always sort of thought that's the way I looked at it, but now you see those integration companies actually using that as part of their monetization strategy. Like I'm going to be your lead gen, hub. Advertising, PPC, display networks, retargeting, content amplification, billboards. I say billboards on the 101. That's the highway that goes between Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And if you can get a billboard out there with your product on it, you've made it. It's really sad. Other tactics of distribution, obviously blogs, news, webinars. There's this term that somebody said to me once and it just really resonated. How do your customers consume marketing? Wow, that was one of those things where I was like, consume market. How do your prospects, how does your market consume marketing? I'd always sort of looked at, what are the different methods, different tactics we should use, but that really resonated with me. If you think about it, I happen to write really long form blog posts because I don't have time to write short posts. I don't have time for editing. I just dump a bunch of stuff out there and hope there's not too many typos. That's just because I'm selfish that way. If I was trying to optimize, I would probably try to figure out how my customers actually consume this stuff, but I don't practice what I preach. But you should probably figure out how your customers actually consume this. So going back to what I said earlier, if you're really good at AdWords, this is what you do. I don't know if I'm really good at writing, but I like to, and I put out a lot of content. I should probably figure out if that's actually what's resonating with my customers. So we have to know, do they read blogs? Do they read long form blog posts, or would a short post work? Do they like videos? Do they like webinars? They'll make time for those because they're still, even today, they're still like an event. Do they like live streaming of in real life events like this? What do we need to do to get their attention? Some people are doing webinars now, but they're not an hour. They're doing like 17-minute webinars, which right there, that kind of, it's like 17 minutes. That's interesting. But also, they understand for some of their customer segments, they can't make an hour. They just can't. Maybe it's because they only have a half an hour lunch because they're selling to, or they're trying to get end users to be a part of this. So they understand what's going on in their world. They don't have a long lunch, so we're not going to take up the whole thing with a webinar. White papers are still a really big deal, even in a self-service setting where, we're going into a free trial or something like that. The old way, some people will say, was to give a white paper, and you kind of nurture the lead over a while, and then you turn them into a more qualified lead, and then sales tries to sell them. So now that we go to a free trial, self-service free trial, do we stop offering the white paper? And the answer is no. Offer the white paper, and then immediately move them into the free trial. Like, it doesn't have to be a weeks-long type of sales cycle. If they still want the white paper, give it to them, and then move them into the free trial. So we have to understand what they need in order to build trust with them. Books are obviously, I'm kind of surprised, actually. So we published the book on customer success in February, and it's still it's still really credible to be able to say I wrote the book on customer success and have it actually be a real book with a real publisher. That's pretty interesting. Even in 2016 and going into 2017, like, why is a book more valuable than a bunch of blog posts or slides or whatever? Like, but it still is. In some markets, that's what's going to get you your foot in the door more than anything else. Or that's what, when your salesperson comes in and says, by the way, our CEO wrote the book on this, like, okay, we're going to do business with you because you guys literally wrote the book on this. That's really important. Apps, community, data. The screenshot is old, but it's from a company called Think Gaming that tells you what's going on in the App Store, which games are doing best, and how much revenue they're generating. Pokemon Go would obviously be up there. I think Clash of Clans just took over Pokemon Go. Why is this cool? Well, it's cool because you get to see how games are doing, but at the end, it actually says, well, there's a what we do call to action, but at the end, probably the place I should have the screenshot, but it's down here somewhere. It says, by the way, we can put you on this list. Like, we can help you generate more revenue from your app. Like, that's pretty cool. People are going here to see how the apps are doing, and then to be able to say, by the way, this is what we do for companies. We move you up this list. Like, that's pretty awesome. So data is another thing. So if you have, actually, I'll tell you, in the US, every quarter, I can't remember, ADP, no, yes, I don't remember. Anyway, it's a private company, and they put out like a jobs report every, or payroll, I think is what it is. The way it's reported on by, on the radio or by the news outlets, it's like it's a government entity putting out this official report. But it's not. It's just a company that has a whole lot of customers, and they're able to aggregate payroll information and lay it out as if it's fact. You could do that. There's nothing stopping you from being that company for your industry, right? So that's a benefit of, actually, if you are a SaaS company, being in the cloud, having everybody basically logging into the same system, you get that data, you could turn that out and make that, you could use that data to position yourself in the market, and really be that expert that everybody turns to. So outreach, cold emails, cold calling, direct postal mail. Postal mail volume around the world is at its lowest, but it's also still really cheap. And if you have customers that could potentially be high value, then you might spend a little bit and actually send something in the postal mail, or like FedEx or DHL, or something that's going to get their attention. Whereas email is kind of overloaded. Nobody answers their phone anymore. that's an option. So we have to continually think about, well, how can we get in front of them? What's going to work? If you write a book, send them a book. Send it FedEx or DHL, and now you know it's going to go to them. Whereas an email that says, hey, download my ebook, they might just ignore that, right? So that's still really important to understand. Customer-driven growth, so we talked about this with virality kinds of ideas. Use-based growth is communication, social networks, things like Slack, really where as part of using this product, I'm exposing other potential customers to this. Or invitation-based systems where I'm inviting other people to collaborate with me. I'll tell you, one of the biggest missed opportunities is in that secondary onboarding. When we bring other people in that have been invited to collaborate, we tend to not think about that as being a key area to hook them and get them to become a customer. We tend to let them do their thing, whatever it was they were invited to do, and that's it. That's a huge opportunity. Your customer just introduced your product to somebody else who could potentially be a customer. Why are you not jumping on that opportunity to get them engaged and then ultimately turn them into a customer? Referrals, powered by widgets, that kind of thing. Those are all different distribution opportunities. So I call this a sanity check. There's a lot of words on these next slides. I apologize. There's a bunch of stuff going on here. You'll get these slides, so you don't have to worry about reading them all. But a sanity check for ideal customer profile is this in its simplest form. If your ideal customer looked at your website or your marketing materials right now, would they know that they are your ideal customer? If you can't answer yes, that's a problem. Sanity check number 2 is if you described a bad fit customer, a customer that doesn't have success potential, and they looked at your website, would they think they're your ideal customer? That's a problem. So if you can fix those 2 things, make sure that your ideal customer would look at your website and say, yeah, this is for me. And make sure that those customers that are a bad fit would look at your website and say, this is obviously not for me. You can fix those 2 things, you're going to fix the quality of the leads that you're getting and probably actually improve the number of quality leads that you're getting. You have to know how your customers consume their marketing. You have to know how they try and buy products. You probably are not in a position, unless you are really the market leader, to dictate how people need to buy products. You're probably not in that position. So you need to sell how they buy. So going back to customer success being across all interactions, one of those interactions is literally how they give you money for your product. A lot of startups really want to just throw up a credit card form and leave it at that. But that's actually not the way enterprise companies buy. They want to go through a sales process. They want to be seen as, they think there's something special, and they want to be treated like that. And so you need to understand that. And if that's not how you can sell, then you need to make sure that you're not selling that way. That you're not attracting customers that need you to sell that way. So how do you get to know who your ideal customer is and understand their characteristics? Customer development. There's a concept in the lean startup world called customer development. There's books that have been written on it. It's this concept of really understanding your customers. It's not just asking them what is your desired outcome. It's literally going, watching what they do, exploring, understanding what the appropriate experience would be. The problem with, in my mind, the lean startup model is that it doesn't really take into consideration the experience. It really takes into consideration just the product, just the functionality, MVP. I would rather look at it like, instead of minimum viable product, I would look at it as minimum viable experience. And I've seen other people start talking about that. It makes me happy because sometimes we try to just build a product that just has the bare minimum functionality, and that's not going to work because even though it will help you achieve your required outcome, the experience is not going to be appropriate for anybody but the earliest of early adopters, and those may or may not indicate whether that's a type of company that you want to do business with later on. So primary market research, secondary market research. You want to talk to your customers, find out who they trust, where do they get their information. Sometimes we just ask, where do you hear about us? Sometimes we ask that, sometimes we don't even ask it. Sometimes we ask it, we don't do anything with that information. We want to know where did they come from, certainly, but we want to know just in general, who do they trust? Where do they get their information? Where do they hang out? All those sorts of things. Because then if we like the characteristics of those customers that are telling us those things, then it would indicate to me at least that we should probably be in those places, right? You also want to talk to customers of competitors. That's always interesting, because as long as the competitor is truly your competitor, not just that they do the same things, but they're at the same price level. They sell to the same type of people in the same types of companies that you want to sell to. Find those true competitors and go figure out who their customers are, and then talk to them about who they trust, where they get their information, that kind of thing. How did they hear about that product? You want to be in those places, right? Now, sometimes when you talk to those customers, you'll actually turn them into your customer. Because even though you found them because they're a testimonial on your competitor's website, which is a very easy place to start, how many times or how often does it happen where somebody is a testimonial, or gives you a testimonial, something happens, they're probably not happy with you anymore, but you don't take them off your testimonial page. So that's the same thing's going to happen with your competitors. They're out there, they have testimonials from their customers. You're going to go talk to those customers, and when you do that, they might not actually not be happy, and they'll become your customer. But the main thing is you'll learn a lot from doing that. And little hack, you might want to find somebody that's not from your company to talk to them, because they might not want to talk to you. So you just find some independent third party to reach out, find them on LinkedIn. So they gave a testimonial, the company, go find the person in the company on LinkedIn, have somebody send a message and say, have a couple of questions about that. I've done that for companies. Works really, really well. You can learn some really interesting things. The other, so if it's not testimonials on your competitor's websites, going through LinkedIn, finding mentions of your competitor's product in their LinkedIn profile, especially certification programs. If they're certified, they're gonna post that. If they're members of app-specific LinkedIn groups or Slack groups or anything like that. These are just more ways of sort of talking to the customers of your competitors, digging for gold, looking for patterns. I'll tell you, in bad guy hacking, there's this idea of the watering hole attack, and this is really useful in non-bad guy hacking. So I'm not in any way condoning anything illegal or negative, but the watering hole attack is somebody wants to infiltrate the government's network. So because they can't get past the firewall or do anything like that, what do? They infiltrate the Chinese restaurant down the street's website, which is horrible and has no security. So they put some malware in there. So when the people from inside, the government go look at what they want to have for lunch, now they're infected, right? So that's the kind of thing that you see with a watering hole attack. People put their guard down. So watering hole in the animal kingdom, that's when the animals go out and have a drink, and then they get attacked. So again, we want to look at it in a positive way. So, look, if we're all here and we're going to go out there in about 30 minutes and have some drinks, and this was more of a public setting, maybe that was a bar that was open to the public, and I knew this event was taking place, and I knew some of you were going to be here, I might make sure I'm at that bar to start some conversations with you, right? This is a great thing to do at events, like big events. People are going to be there. The customers of your competitors are going to be there, or your potential competitors or your potential customers are going to be there. Great way to start some conversations in a very low-key way. They let their guard down. You come in and attack them in a nice way. Another, just real quick. If you keep seeing, and looking for patterns, you keep seeing a blog that comes up all the time. People trust that. How can you get on that blog? You got to make sure that you're there. So there's all sorts of ways you can do that. One of the easiest things to do is really study what they're doing. Figure out if they've ever taken guest posts from anybody. And if they have, this makes this a lot easier. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't do it anyway. Learn about their the way that they write, their language, their tone, and write something for them. Don't ask them. Don't say, "Hey, would love to do something with you." Just say, "Hey, I'm an avid reader of your blog. I wrote this for you. I tried to match your tone. Not trying to be you, but I tried to match the tone of your blog. If you want to post it, that'd be great." if somebody, I mean, every once in a while somebody does that with me, that would be awesome. Nobody ever does that with me. If you did the work for me, but I get a lot of people saying, hey, we'd like to do something. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. You just want access to my audience. I want amazing content. If you want access to my audience, the only thing that's going to get you there is like world-changing content. So I'm not gonna expose my audience to that, to just somebody that's trying to pitch something. It's probably 2 or 3 times in the history of blogging for me. I literally just passed like 10 years of 16ventures.com. That's happened like 2 or 3 times max. But if more people did that, that'd be awesome. So let me kind of go through here. So cutting through the noise, like I said, if you understand the language, or you understand the desired outcome of your customer, you're going to be able to really get into that conversation that's already going on in their mind. If you go through that enrichment process of learning from your customer success people, or just otherwise learning from anybody that has direct contact with your customers, you're going to be able to take that learning and use that to create the appropriate message around their desired outcome. Understand where you need to go so that the message is going to be appropriate in the appropriate places. I mean, this is the kind of thing that could just rapidly accelerate not just the quality, or not just the quantity really, but also the quality of your leads in a really big way. So we took our break. All right, so I've gone a little bit long. We'll still have time for some questions and answers. I want to do this real quick. Success milestones. This is more about, okay, after you've already acquired the customer, how do we make sure that they're on the right track? All right, so we know what the appropriate experience is for a customer segment. Now it's time to take that and start putting some action in place, taking action on it. So the required outcome, we have their appropriate experience. Again, this was just a way to visualize it, but we need to figure out what are the success milestones along the way towards their ultimate desired outcome. Success milestones, there is no universal definition for what a success milestone is, except it's a significant time in our relationship. So it could be the first time when you sign up. Then you sign up for a free trial. Well, there's a time in the free trial where becoming a paying customer is the most logical next step. That's a success milestone. You become a paying customer. That's a success milestone. There's a point where we would say you're onboarded because you've achieved first value. Or you got to the point where first value is not necessarily something that you've achieved. You haven't achieved value yet because it's going to take a little bit longer. But for the first time outside of sales and marketing, for the first time, you see the value potential in the product, right? And you see value potential in the relationship. Sometimes we have to be really honest. It might take you months to get true value out of our relationship, but I could probably get you in a couple of days, maybe a couple of hours or minutes, depending upon the type of product, to really see the value potential in this relationship. And if I can show you that for real, outside of what I promised in the sales and marketing, that's actually something pretty important. And that should be a success milestone. So there's going to be a success milestone where I show you the real value, and then there's a success milestone where you've achieved that value. In between those success milestones are required activities. Some of those activities are going to be things that people do in the product. By the way, you have a worksheet on this, so you take a look at it. It'll help you define all of this. It's going to give you you're going to come up with a list of everything that has to happen in order for the customer to be successful between those success milestones. Some of those things are going to happen inside of your product by the customer. Some things are going to happen outside of the product by the customer. If you don't understand what has to happen outside of your product by the customer, then you don't really understand your customer. If you think everything happens in your product, you're wrong. And the sooner you realize that, and the sooner you can operationalize around that and try, even if we don't have visibility or don't have control over what's going on outside of the product, but try to figure out how you can help make sure those things happen. The sooner you can do that, the sooner you're going to be more successful, because the sooner your customers are going to be more successful. So we take all of these things, we map that out. Some of those success milestones, oh, by the way, some of those things we have to do. We have to do for them. Some of those things we could do for them for a fee, right? So, it's not all about recurring revenue. Sometimes we can actually add other revenue that accelerates their path to more recurring revenue or simply getting value. So we have to take those things into consideration. Then some of those success milestones are going to have a logical expansion opportunity. Some of those are going to have a logical advocacy opportunity. This is what the spreadsheet looks like that I sent you, sort of. You basically have the list of things that have to happen. There is no right number. I will tell you it's probably much more than 13, but that's just what's in here. In the yellow, that's kind of like, those are the things that happen multiple times. It's kind of like a cycle. We just simply indicate, is this a success milestone? We say we do this for the customer, the product does this, the customer does this outside the product, we could do this for the customer. Is this a success gap? That's something we really need to be honest about. Is there a possibility that in order to achieve this success milestone, there's a success gap there? Like they could do this thing, but even if they do this, it doesn't mean that they're actually getting what they needed to get. So, can they send those emails, but they're not actually getting more people to their event because they wrote bad copy. Their subject line was terrible. It passed the spam score, but it just didn't pass the, this is a good email, right? Was their call to action good? Was the call to action to a landing page that sucks, that doesn't do what it needs to do? All of those things are sort of outside of your control. Ideally, you could build a lot of that into the product, but at the end of the day, somebody who doesn't know what they're doing with your product, is just somebody that doesn't know how to actually get, what they're looking for. Your product is a tool at that point. We need to understand that. They are not going to be successful. And the thing is, no customer in the history of the world has ever taken the blame for not achieving their desired outcome. They're always going to blame you. It's always your fault. Even if that's unfair, we have to understand that. So we can take that and we can be like, well, that's just the way it is, or we can try to fix it. We can try to bridge those gaps. And this is what's going to help. If you do this, it may be something you've never done. It may be something you did early on. And the reason I do it in a spreadsheet versus a flow chart or mind map or anything like that is because this is easy. Start here. You can go visualize it however you want later on, but just start with the easiest thing. Go back and say, what does it take for a customer segment to be successful? Map that out. Because that's the only way you can really put somebody on an Ascension model. The Ascension model is really the key to that whole land and expand. We want people to come in. We want to optimize the value delivery. We want to put them on that logical Ascension model. Customer success management is the way to do that. Obviously, we need to manage this process. And as I said, we're going to get to a point where we have a success milestone with a logical upsell opportunity with it. We need to be able to make sure that happens on a predictable basis. And I like to say recurring revenue is king. So if we're in the SaaS business, we know that recurring revenue is really what we want. And in fact, investors will tend to not want you to have too much non-recurring revenue because it's called attachment, and that means that it's not as predictable, right? So, but here's the thing: non-recurring revenue in the form of services, training, whatever, consulting, that could actually accelerate the path to recurring revenue. Where if we simply waited until logically they were ready for the next add-on, it might take a while. So I want to offer some training, but if I'm worried about attachment, I could say this: if I have a $10,000 ARR, $10,000 annual recurring revenue, and I add $2,500 training, that might look like 25% attachment of a non-recurring revenue. But if I do that and it leads them to add more recurring revenue, so they add another $10,000 product, now they're at $20,000 ARR, and that $2,500 doesn't look like it's so bad from an attachment rate. If you guys don't have investors, just offer services and use that to improve your revenue and also improve your relationship with the customer and hopefully move them towards success. These things also apply to advocacy, and we want to sort of have the same Ascension model when it comes to advocacy that we do with expansion. Start small. Ask your customers to leave you a review before you ask them to give you a video testimonial of how amazing you are, right? I mean, start small, but start orchestrating it early. You could say to a customer, you could start this today. You could say, in order to keep our marketing costs down, we rely on word of mouth a lot. Our reviews on software review sites are really important to us. Did you see any of those when you were reviewing or when you were looking at our at products to solve your problem or whatever? And they'll say yes, and you say, okay, cool. That's why we know that these things are really important. It keeps our marketing costs down, and which in turn keeps our price down. So as we help you be successful, occasionally we'll reach out and want you to help us out there. Is that fair? Most people will say, yeah. What you've done is you got them to agree to something, and then you say, of course, not right now. You haven't gotten any value from us. I wouldn't think of asking you to be an advocate for us until you get some value. You've set that up, you've orchestrated it, and now when you do come back, when they hit a success milestone with advocacy attached to it, when you do come back, it's not going to be out of the blue, and they're going to understand. And I would do that, really like as soon as they get some value, want to ask them to do something, and then escalate that over time. The same thing. So for expansion, we have success milestones. In advocacy, we have success milestones. The same thing goes for what I have here on expansion and triggers and things like that. The same thing goes for advocacy as well as expansion. Sometimes they're going to be tied to a success milestone. Sometimes they're going to be trigger based. There are going to be things we learn about the company. They just acquired another company. They just hired a new VP of marketing, whatever. There's going to be things that would make us want to reach out and give them an upsell offer. There's going to be things that we would want to reach out and have them be an advocate for us at that moment because something just happened. If they just mentioned us in the press, that's awesome. Let's reach out and get them to do a video interview with us, right? Or hey, that's awesome. Will you speak at our event? Like they just went out on their own and did something. We need to be monitoring for that, and you could say reward them for that. I wouldn't reward them with something, a gift. I would reward them with more chances to advocate for you, because like I said earlier, customers that come in through advocacy are often stronger. But McKinsey said that customers that advocate for you themselves become stronger, which is pretty interesting. So there's kind of two sides. Like advocacy is incredibly powerful. Customers that come in through advocacy are themselves stronger. Your customers that advocate for you themselves become stronger. Like that's awesome. So we need to make sure this stuff happens. And that's it. I mean, if we can think about our what is customer success? It's when your customers achieve their desired outcome through their interactions with your company. If we can think about that at a high level, understand that in order to help our customers actually succeed, we need to operationalize this through something called customer success management. But really, we have to understand that all of these interactions occur across the customer lifecycle. They start early, they continue all along the lifecycle throughout the multiple years that the customers are our customer. If we look at this holistically, we understand that this thread of customer success runs through every aspect of our business, and that it truly is a growth engine. So hopefully this kind of got you thinking about stuff in the right way. Go back and look at those worksheets that we sent you. That stuff is potentially game-changing for you. So I want to open it up next few minutes to questions. If you have any questions, I always say this, I don't want you to leave with any questions you came in with, but I know you're probably going to have a ton of questions that are new, and that's cool. I want you to leave with those. You can take those with you. No, any questions on this stuff? I know you guys have some questions. Yes?
I find it that when it comes to customer success and handing over from sales to actually customer success managers, the success gap, as you define it, can be quite different in terms of actually closing the deal. It might be that the product fit is there and that technical fit is there and that we can achieve the required outcomes, but still the gap is quite large when the customer is actually over in customer success hands.
Yeah.
How do you feel that it is? What's a good way to actually attack that?
Yeah, there's actually a moment right after the customer buys. I call it the WTF moment. You know what that means. And it really is this moment where it's like, what did I just do? There's a part of me that's really excited. And even we have to understand this, even in the B2B world, when we get excited about this stuff, because it's going to, at least theoretically, at least based on what we've talked about, it's going to help us achieve what we need to achieve. There's still excitement. One of the biggest problems in that handoff is that excitement goes away, right? We drop the ball in that instance. We also start asking the same questions over and over that they've already been asked. I always hear, customers fall through the cracks, but that's actually wrong because that wouldn't make it seem like we forget about the customer. Like once they sign, we're like, done. The reality is actually the customer gets like inundated with questions and different people, and it actually becomes a terrible experience, and they have to answer the same questions over and over because there's no continuity there, and that just starts to erode trust. And so that WTF moment is either the time where you pick up the ball and you run with it all the way through there, and you never drop it, you never kill the excitement, you're moving them in the right direction, or that little voice in the back of their head, even though they're excited, there's a little voice in the back of the head that's like, how are they going to screw this up? how did I just make a big, huge mistake? How did I just invest my political and social capital inside the company to bring in a product that is unproven or is not known, and how did I just screw up everything in my entire career? And they're just like going down the spiral. They're waiting for you to mess it up. And you have the opportunity to not do that. And so just kind of at a high level, you're absolutely right. This is a huge problem. So first of all, I don't like the term handoff. I still say it occasionally because it's something it's so ingrained, this idea of a handoff. But I don't like that because it really makes it sound like, there could be a wall here and I'm just kind of tossing it over. And you hear that sometimes. We toss it over from sales. We need to stop thinking about it like that. We're all on the same, exactly. We're all on the same page. We're all moving in the same direction. Sales is not like against customer success. Sales is not at odds with customer success, or at least it shouldn't be, but very often it is. And again, it goes back to maybe there's some things that sales are, they're not closing good fit customers. They're not closing customers with success potential. They're doing all of these negative things, and then they're giving it to customer success, who is supposed to help a customer who's a bad fit try to be successful, and it's just never going to work. So a lot of this starts with just making sure that sales is doing the things that are in line with customer success, and then making sure that customer success is involved very early I'd like to bring customer success in before the sale closes, so that the customer knows who they're going to be working with, and we can get some turnover of discovery from the customer before the customer comes in. Sometimes that's not feasible, so we just need to make sure that we operationalize that handoff as much as possible, so that the customer doesn't fall through the cracks. They don't get over communicated to. They don't get asked the same question over and over, and we don't stop that excitement. Now, how it's going to look, what literally on the ground, what it's going to look like is going to be different for every company, and it's going to be different probably across different customer segments. So you're going to have some lower revenue customers that, frankly, you shouldn't be having a lot of high touch interactions with. So we need to figure out going back to that success milestones, like what is it going to take to make sure that they're successful? On the flip side, those customers that need that high touch, what do we need to do? Is it going to be, a call with our executives on there, and kickoff call and all this stuff that has to happen before we make that work? And then are we going to go out to on site and do some work? So it's going to vary. So I can't give you a specific answer there, but I can tell you that the concern around that as causing problems, that's a huge issue. I don't know if it makes you feel any better. A lot of companies fall into that trap. The best companies have figured out how to bridge that gap and just make sure that isn't, that the sale isn't the end point, that's when the hard work begins. And that's why I try to show, like, so much happens after the sale. Like, I don't even like to think of it as post-sales, because the sale is just one part of the relationship. It's all those years that come after that. So the main thing is getting really focused around this idea of customer success as an operating philosophy, and making sure that everybody's on board, so that we don't get into a situation like I see at some companies where we don't even trust sales. Like, they're sending us bad fit customers. The discovery that they're doing is garbage, and so I can't even trust what I'm getting. So when I start working with a customer, it's like we're starting from scratch. But the customer's already gone through all these processes, and it's like they just lose faith right out of the gate. And that's what I see when I look at churn reasons. That stuff so I said the seeds of churn are planted early. That's the kind of stuff that happens. So you're not unique if you're experiencing that. The way to look at it, the way to solve that, is to operationalize around customer success. And this is where, just one more thought on that. If you have a customer success organization, and that's kind of where customer success begins and ends in the company, then you're doing it wrong. It has to be an overarching idea. Just having one little part of the organization focused on making sure the customers are successful, that's going to be hard. So, cool. Probably one more quick question.
I have another one. What's the best way to incentivize the CSM?
Lead them appropriately.
Definitely, but I mean,
I'm telling you, if you jump to I need to incentivize, you're probably missing out on some other really important things.
but incentivize in terms of having an actual KPI for measuring.
So, okay, just in terms of measurement, that's another thing. I would look at. It depends on where you're at. So the maturity level of your customer success organization, and how many, do you have a lot of customers right now that are bad fit, that are either that are going to churn, that we need to let go? We have maybe some customer segments that were acquired before we had operationalized customer success, so maybe they're not getting all the value they really should. Customers that came in after we operationalized customer success, they're doing great. Probably don't measure your CSMs in one way. Some CSMs are going to be working with customers that are a bad fit. We need to look at them in a different way. But let's say everything was great. We have customers that are a good fit. They all came on after we operationalized. At that point, I would say you probably want to look at net revenue retention as one of the key metrics, but temper that with some sort of success vector or health score, so that we know even if I was able to get more revenue from my existing customer base, that it's going to be revenue that'll stick around because I know we did it in the right way. That make sense? Cool. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your attention. This was amazing. Hopefully, I got you moving in the right direction. Get your mind moving. Stick around. See you outside. We'll have some drinks and have some fun. Cool. Thank you.